Chapter 514. Green Wolf brought a few of his trusted subordinates to protect Zhou Xian and Li Ya as they boarded a black Land Rover. Then he personally got into the driver's seat, started the car and dashed out. Seeing the steel monster charging towards the battlefield, both sides quickly opened up a path. Someone used the knife in his hand as a weapon to smash the Land Rover, but it was repelled by the tough body of the car. Clanging sounds could be heard incessantly. Knives and sticks flew everywhere and the scene was a mess. After the Land Rover escaped, the two teams quickly got entangled again. Knives and sticks were waved and the flames of war were reignited. Only when they got out of the clear sky building did Li Ya recover from the thrilling scene just now. She said angrily, "I didn't expect Master Zhou Xian to have evil intentions. I always thought he was the most trustworthy person in Qinghong." Zhou Qian's face was solemn as he said, "History has proven that most of the rebels are the ones with the most hope to take the crown." Li Ya nodded and said, "Indeed. If something happens to Uncle, Zhou Xian can naturally take over Qinghong's brothers in business. He looks loyal on the surface but he's treacherous in his bones. This kind of person is the most vicious and cunning. He's just unwilling to be satisfied with the current situation." Zhou Qian sighed softly. 13 fought with me for the world. We fought with knives and blood and made great achievements. However, a general has to fight. What kind of general is a general if he doesn't fight? Now that the traces of Qinghong are fading, it's the modernized Clear Sky group that has soared to the sky. 13 is a hot-blooded person with no place to spill his blood. He hides in the huge shadow of Clear Sky group. Even some newly recruited talents can show their skills and get flowers and applause. 13 has almost been forgotten by people. It's understandable that he has resentment in his heart. Li Ya sighed and said, "Those who can't keep up with the times can only be abandoned by the times. When I was young, Uncle told me the story of the brave and the clown. When the enemy attacked, the brave waved his spear and went into battle. The clown hid behind the crowd and laughed. He pointed at the brave warriors who were bathed in blood on the battlefield and shouted, 'There was a thorn in his foot.' The brave charged in front and the clown nitpicked at the back. Zhou Xian is that nitpicking clown. He can't integrate himself into this society, but he can't accept the achievements of others. For so many years his uncle had never mistreated them and treated them as his real brothers. But how did they treat him? Gather against uncle, murder uncle. If her uncle died tonight and they took over the Green Cloud Group, what would they do to the Green Cloud Group? Do they have the ability to control such a modern company?" Li Ya, remember, don't think of yourself as too smart and don't think of your opponent as too stupid. The reason why they can become our opponents is because they have the intelligence to match us. Zhou Qian said with a serious expression, "Aren't we facing the same crisis now?" "Uncle, I understand." Li Ya nodded her head. The car drove all the way to the west. After getting on the main road, the traffic gradually increased. Just when Li Ya thought that they were out of danger, the green wolf in front suddenly reported, "Master Qing, we are being followed." Zhou Qian frowned and asked, "Do you know who they are?" "I don't know yet," Green Wolf said. "But they're very stealthy. They're only following us from afar. They don't seem to have any intention of getting closer." A fierce glint flashed in Zhou Qian's eyes as he said, "The reason why the wolf isn't in a hurry to get close to its prey is because it's waiting for the best time to strike. These people think that we're already their prey, so they're slowly following behind us. They know that we can't escape." "Master Qing, should we shake them off?" Green Wolf asked. "Let's give it a try." Zhou Qian said. "Let's beat them up. Who knows, they might be our friends." Receiving the order, Green Wolf suddenly sped up. The Land Rover's generator roared as the wheels rolled on the ground. Zhou Qingdi looked through the rearview mirror and saw a black Toyota speeding up as well. It was as if it was biting its tail, unwilling to let go. Green Wolf sped up again, overtaking the cars in front of him one after another. The black Toyota didn't want to be outdone either and also overtook its opponent. In fact, their speed and driving skills were much better than Green Wolf's. The Toyota was getting closer and closer. Very soon the two cars were driving side by side. Zhou Qian looked through the window. The opposite window was completely dark, so he couldn't see anyone inside. "Speed up again," Zhou Qian said. Green Wolf slammed on the accelerator and the Land Rover charged forward like a mad bull. The car shook more and more violently. Green Wolf gripped the steering wheel tightly. If he wasn't careful, the steering wheel would spin and the front of the car might crash into the railings on both sides of the road. Du Qing saw that the Toyota didn't want to be outdone either. It was still following them closely. Bang! The car shook slightly. The feeling wasn't clear. Could just be that his heart missed a beat. However, Du Qing sensed danger and all the hairs on his body stood on end. Green Wolf, Du Qing shouted. Master Qing. Green Wolf held the steering wheel with both hands and kept overtaking the cars, not daring to relax. What's your order? Turn to Harbor Road, Du Qing said in a low voice. Master Qing, Green Wolf panicked and reminded, Harbor Road is too secluded. It's not good for us to break out. Who said we're breaking out? Du Qing asked. Green Wolf didn't dare to refute Du Qing's order. At the crossroad in front, he suddenly turned the steering wheel and the car sped towards Harbor Road. At the end of Harbor Road was the sea. To the east was the seafood pier, and to the west was the Plum Creek scenic area. The Harbor Road was cold and gloomy. Other than the pale street lights, there were no cars or pedestrians. Du Qing told Green Wolf to drive the car on this road. If the Toyota behind them stopped, then both sides would have to fight to the death. Green Wolf had already thought of this possibility. He took out a long knife from his waist. If those people dared to come close, he would stab them in the head. Liya didn't understand Du Qing's intention, but she also took out a small silver gun from her waist. There were 3 bullets in the gun. No matter what, she wanted to help her uncle reduce some of his burden. The other man in black in the passenger seat was called Xiao Dao. He was one of the 8 great warriors by Du Qing's side. According to seniority, he was far ahead of Green Wolf. Green Wolf was one of Qing Hong's new idols. He was discovered by Du Qing by chance and slowly became a hired thug. Xiao Dao's arm was wrapped in gauze. Because he moved too much, the wound was torn open again. The gauze and his clothes were also dyed red with blood. He turned to look at Du Qing and said, Master Qing, there are a few bastards who betrayed us, don't take it to heart. How you treat us brothers, we will all remember it. I'll say goodbye to Master Qing here. If I don't come back, I'll have to ask Master Qing to take care of my family. You won't die, Du Qing clenched his teeth and said, they're the ones who should die, Master Qing. Xiao Dao smiled and said, it's my good fortune to die for you. I Xiao Dao have never admired anyone in my life. Only Master Qing can make me admire you. Green Wolf, stop the car, I'll block them for a bit, Brother Dao. I told you to stop the car, are you deaf? Xiao Dao angrily scolded him. Xiao Dao, don't be rash. Du Qing lowered his voice and said. Then Du Qing suddenly shouted, Green Wolf, stop the car. Screech. Green Wolf didn't even think and stepped on the brakes. Screech. The sound of a sharp blade cutting through metal came from the roof of the car. A black-clothed man was thrown onto the windshield in front of the car due to the sudden braking. The black-clothed man grabbed the rearview mirror with one hand and a long blade in the other. He held the long blade and fiercely stabbed at the windshield. Bang! This Land Rover was custom-made. The windows were made according to bulletproof standards. Although the black-clothed man was strong, the long blade in his hand couldn't pierce through the glass. Even so, under his attack the entire car shook. Green Wolf broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't expect a black-clothed monster to be hiding on top of the car. They didn't even know when he climbed up. If he stopped the car and let Xiao Dao get off, the moment Xiao Dao opened the door, his head would have been cut off by the black-clothed man. Xiao Dao was even more terrified. After he calmed down, he raged and cursed, "This lowly bastard, I'll kill you with one slash." He pushed the car door open and slashed at the black-clothed man on top of the windshield. The black-clothed man was as agile as a swallow. With a roll, he disappeared from everyone's sight. Green Wolf, be careful, Du Qing anxiously shouted and pounced forward. Crack! A crisp sound was heard. The car door was pierced by the long blade. At the same time, the side of Green Wolf's abdomen was also pierced. The black-clothed man's head appeared from the side of the car window. His exposed eyes revealed a bloodthirsty glint. He held the long blade in his hand and was about to stab it again when Liya raised her gun and shot at him. Die, die! Liya pulled the trigger with all her might, emptying the 3 bullets in the silver gun in one go. However, the black-clothed man disappeared again. He came and went without a trace. He was a Japanese martial artist. Chapter 5:15. Get off! Du Qing shouted. He pushed open the door on the left and was the first to jump out. Leah also got off the car and followed closely behind Du Qing. Xiao Dao raised his blade and searched for the black-clothed man's figure. He looked at the roof and the chassis of the car, but he still could not find the whereabouts of the murderer. This black-clothed man was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing unpredictably and could freely hide his body. Whiz! A long saber stabbed towards Little Knife's heart from the back. The black-clothed man had actually sneaked into the Land Rover without anyone noticing, and from the back seat that Li Ya and the rest had just left, he attacked Xiao Dao, who had his back pressed against the car door without any defense. "Xiao Dao, be careful." Li Ya just happened to turn around and saw this shocking scene. But the black-clothed man's speed was too fast. Just as she opened her mouth, the blade had already pierced out. Before she could finish her warning, the blade was already about to pierce into Xiao Dao's body. Baka! The black-clothed man's eyes flashed with red light. To him, killing was an extremely exciting thing. Fortunately, he was still unable to stab the long blade into Xiao Dao's body. Because when Xiao Dao's life was in danger, Du Qing rushed over and pushed him away. Hiss! The long blade pierced through the air and could only stir up a mass of air. Du Qing's body rushed towards the black-clothed man, and punched towards his face that was wearing a black hood. The black-clothed man's body shrunk back into the back of the car, and with a ping sound he jumped out from the other side of the car door. This battle happened in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. Only then did the black Toyota that had been following them stop next to the Land Rover. The car door was pushed open and a man in a black suit and a man in the same black suit walked out of the car. To them, the 4 people in front of them were already 4 corpses, and there was no need to hide their identities. "Master Qing, we meet again." The man in the black suit stood in front of Du Qing and said with a smile. "Qin Yusen, you dog," Du Qing scolded angrily. "You had just graduated from university and had nothing. Who promoted you to your current position? Now you and Lu Shisan betrayed me together?" "Master Qing, please don't misunderstand." Qin Yusen hurriedly explained. "I'm not on the same side as Lord 13. To be honest, if you didn't tell me that Lord 13 and the others had betrayed you, I wouldn't have known that such a thing had happened. Lord 13 is really a good-for-nothing. Lord Qing treated him like a brother, so how could he do such an ungrateful thing? What's the difference between you and Lu Shisan?" "That's a big difference," Qin Yusen said with a serious expression. "Master Qing, I will always remember your kindness to me and I will never dare to forget it." However, these Japanese friends had paid a large sum of money, and their only request was for me to help them find Master Qing. I didn't think it was a big deal. That's why I brought them to guard the underground parking lot of Clear Sky Building. I think that Master Qing would need to take a car to get off work, right? As expected, we managed to guard it. Qin Yusen turned to look at the 2 men in black beside him and said, "As for what they're going to do next, it has nothing to do with me. Master Qing, I've always been on your side." "Shameless." Leah gritted her teeth and scolded. Because of the special members of Qing Hong, the people of Clear Sky Building loved to talk about loyalty and righteousness. Every single one of them was loyal and devoted, and every single one of them claimed to be supremely righteous. When Clear Sky Building was developing rapidly, such words did sound joyous and made people happy from the bottom of their hearts. Qin Yusen was one of the opportunists. Qin Yusen went to Clear Sky Group to apply for a job right after graduating from university. That was the peak period for university students, and it was extremely difficult to find a job for graduates. Qin Yusen majored in legal affairs, and as a fresh graduate from law school, what good job could be waiting for him? His life was tight and his girlfriend broke up with him and went to Beijing. Coincidentally, his mother was going to have a heart operation. Calamities came one after another and his frail body couldn't bear it at all. When he wanted to ask the company for a year's salary in advance, he argued with the head of the company's finance department. Coincidentally, he was discovered by Du Qing, who was inspecting the company. Du Qing asked about the situation, and not only did he not blame him, he even asked the finance department to give him 3 years' salary. Du Qing had a long talk with him. Qin Yusen, who had graduated from law school, was highly regarded by Du Qing, and he also said countless times that he was a loyal dog raised by Master Qing, and that he would bite whoever Master Qing told him to bite. But a friend in need is a friend indeed. When Clear Sky Building was in danger, people with ulterior motives and all kinds of people wearing all kinds of masks would jump out. Lu Shisan was like that, and so was Qin Yusen. Miss Leah, I've always admired you. It's just that you've never been willing to look me in the eye. Xianxia sighed and said, if you had accepted my pursuit and become my girlfriend earlier, how would things have ended up like this? When you're besieged on all sides and in danger, at least I'll stand firmly by your side and shield you from the wind and rain. Because I feel disgusted just by looking at you. Leah said with a cold smile. What a proud woman. Unfortunately, Xianxia pointed at the two men in black next to him and said, they don't know how to be gentle with women like me. If they do anything to you, it'll be too late for regrets. Seeing Xianxia and Du Qing arguing fiercely about something and pointing at the two of them from time to time, the two Chunin ninjas who crossed the sea looked at each other, feeling a strong sense of wariness in their hearts. What are they talking about? Mitsui Playboy asked in a low voice using ninja lingo. Could it be that they're discussing terms? Koizumi answered with a face full of anger. If he can accept our bribe, he will also accept the price of others. That Du Qing is 100 times wealthier than us. What an untamed wild dog, Mitsui Playboy said angrily. He held the long sword in his hand and suddenly turned 90 degrees. Screech! The long sword in his hand pierced into Xianxia's abdomen. The smile on Xianxia's face froze. He looked at the long sword in his abdomen and the blood gushing out of it in disbelief. He asked in Japanese, why, we hate traitors, Mitsui Playboy said with a look of disdain. We don't understand what you're talking about with your previous master, but we can't accept betrayal, so it's safest for you to die. Xianxia reached out his hand trying to grab something. But he didn't have the strength to grab anything. Mitsui Playboy suddenly pulled out his long sword, and Xianxia's body fell to the ground like a lifeless wooden puppet. Mitsui Playboy swung the long sword that was dripping with blood and glared at Du Qing viciously. He said in Japanese, insulting the sword god is the same as insulting us Japanese martial artists. We can only use your blood to wash away the insult that the sword god's descendant has suffered. Mitsui Playboy's body disappeared as soon as he finished speaking. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Du Qing. He raised the long sword in his hand and slashed at the small knife in front of Du Qing. He had to kill these small fries first before he could get rid of Du Qing. Although the process was a little complicated, he believed that it wouldn't take too much time. Smack! Mitsui Playboy's body was sent flying like a kite with a broken string, and he fell to the ground with a thud. After Mitsui Playful charged out, Koizumi Bukaku chased after him. However, Mitsui Playboy was thrown back the moment he made his move. Koizumi, who was halfway through his charge, could only retreat in a hurry. Koizumi looked at Du Qing in shock. Could there be a peerless martial artist hidden in their group? Very soon Koizumi noticed something strange. Because there was one more person in the group of prey. It was a very young man. Fang Yan walked out from behind Du Qing and stood in front of Du Qing, Leah, and the rest with his thin but not weak body. He looked at Xiao Quan with disdain and said, "You've set such a heavy bait but you only got 2 small fishes. It's really disappointing." Koizumi didn't understand the Wuxia language. Of course, if he could understand the Wuxia language, he wouldn't have bribed Xianxia to help him find Du Qing's whereabouts. However, he could see the ridicule in Fang Yan's eyes. If Fang Yan knew what he was thinking, he would have explained it to him. Fang Yan really didn't mean to ridicule him. He just despised him a lot. He had spent so much time and invested so many cameos, but he only caught 2 small fish. Wasn't it too unfulfilling? You wanted to blow up a dinosaur but you only killed a fly. You wanted to kill a goddess with a single shot, but you ended up killing a psycho. Fang Yan felt wronged, alright? As a warrior he could die but he couldn't bear to be ridiculed. Xiao Quan bowed disrespectfully, and his body suddenly disappeared from the spot. Whoosh! Like a meteor he dashed into Fang Yan's palm. That's right, his neck was in Fang Yan's hand. It was as if he was the one who rushed over to die. Koizumi stared at Fang Yan with his eyes wide open. His face was filled with horror and disbelief. He clearly wanted to sneak behind Fang Yan and stab him in the back from the heart. Although he had a poor sense of direction, it was a straight line attack and the distance between them was less than 5 meters. There were no obstacles in the way. He didn't think he could get lost to this extent. How did he accidentally fall into someone else's palm? Killing you will only dirty my hands. Fang Yan stared at Koizumi's ugly face with disdain. Although Koizumi was wearing a hood and only his eyes were exposed, in Fang Yan's eyes he was definitely not a handsome guy. No matter how handsome he was, he couldn't be as handsome as him. Koizumi looked at Fang Yan in confusion. Big brother, what are you talking about? Can't you speak Japanese? Can't you find a translator? The language barrier is killing me. But if I don't kill you it will hurt my heart, said Fang Yan. Crack. Fang Yan's fingers exerted a little force, and Koizumi's head drooped lifelessly. Chapter 5:16. Ninjas appear and disappear unpredictably, but they are not real ghosts or gods. This is not the first time that Fang Yan has come into contact with ninjas. Qing Yin, a disciple of the Chiba army, is a very skilled ninja. Moreover, it is easy to get the superior ninja, which is also known as the wisdom ninja. In that kind of narrow KTV room they can do many unimaginable things. At that time the presence of Jiang Qin, Yuan Lin and Xianxia really caused a lot of trouble for Fang Yan. However, even a ninja of that level is not a match for Fang Yan at all. Not to mention these two idiots who should have just been promoted to Chunin not long ago. This time he set up such a big trap and made such a big movement, but he only attracted these two small fish? Fang Yan is very disappointed, so he naturally has some dislike for these two brats. Trash, like you have the nerve to jump around in Wuxia? Unfortunately, the two Japanese did not understand Fang Yan's thoughts at this time, or they would definitely reduce their grievances. It is said that it is difficult to become a jonin out of 1,000 ninjas, but a chunin must at least stand out from hundreds of ninjas to have such qualifications. Not just anyone can be promoted. Chunin is also very precious, okay? How can you not treat the village chief as a cadre? Fang Yan very flexibly broke Koizumi's neck. Then step by step he walked towards Mitsui Playboy, who has fallen to the ground and hasn't yet got up. With Mitsui Playboy's strength he was only thrown away, but his body may have already adjusted the angle in midair and landed steadily. Even if he accidentally fell to the ground he has already agilely climbed up from the ground. Can a guy who is not flexible enough become a glorious ninja? That would never happen. But Mitsui Playboy has been lying on the ground, still has no chance to get up. Of course this has nothing to do with Mitsui Playboy, but because when Fang Yan threw him away he locked his Tianju acupoint, causing his whole body to lose strength for a moment. Then she used her soft force to attack his body, destroying all the vital parts of his body. It could be said that Fang Yan had turned Mitsui Playboy into a cripple after a brief encounter. This was also the reason why Mitsui Playboy was unable to get up. Fang Yan stood in front of Mitsui Playboy and looked down at him. Mitsui Playboy was shouting something with an excited expression. Fang Yan did not understand Japanese, and there was no way to translate what he was saying. Maybe he was begging for mercy, saying that he was wrong and that he had a wife in the middle. Who would care about that? Leah looked at Fang Yan in shock. Was this the Fang Yan she knew? The one with the cheeky face, the one with two dimples on his face when he smiled, the one who liked to sneak glances at beautiful women, but would be a little shy when he was discovered. Previously, Leah did not have a clear understanding of him and only felt that he was a somewhat special big boy. Even in her eyes, Fang Yan was not a mature and charming man. The current Fang Yan made her feel strong, safe and dangerous. Because of Fang Yan's gaze, although he was calm most of the time and even had a faint smile on his face. However, when a sharp glint flashed in his eyes, that kind of feeling was frightening. It was as if a sheep had suddenly turned into a wolf, or an earthworm had suddenly turned into a poisonous snake. Leah finally understood why her uncle Du Qing told her not to provoke Fang Yan. It was better to avoid such a man. He was a pervert. Fang Yan raised his foot and was about to step on Mitsui Playboy when Du Qing stopped him and said, "Young master, leave it to me." Du Qing took out a dagger from his bosom and squatted down. Ignoring Mitsui Playboy's angry and frightened eyes, he stabbed the dagger into Mitsui Playboy's heart. Mitsui Playboy's body suddenly stiffened, and then no longer had any signs of life. Du Qing took the handkerchief that Leah handed over and wiped the blood on his palm. He smiled and said, "This kind of small fry don't dirty young master's hands." In the past, Du Qing and Fang Yan called each other brother, but after the secret discussion at the Thousand Leaves Tea House, he began to learn from others and call Fang Yan young master. To be honest, Fang Yan was not used to this kind of address. Our family is not a wealthy family, why are we called young master? You can call me handsome guy or something, at least that way people will feel that the name is true to its name and not hypocritical. Fang Yan looked at Du Qing and asked with concern, "Big brother Du, are you all right?" Fortunately, young master came in time. "I'm fine," Du Qing said with a smile. He pointed at Green Wolf, who was being helped out of the car by Xiao Dao, and said, It's just that this brother's injuries are more serious. N. Fang Yan nodded and said, "It's good that you're fine." Du Qing walked to Xiao Dao's side and whispered a few words into his ear. Xiao Dao excitedly nodded and said, "Don't worry, Master Qing, I'll take care of this." Du Qing solemnly patted his shoulder and said, "I'll take care of your family. No matter when you come back, I'll reserve a place for you by my side." This was a promise. Any lackey who was willing to take care of the boss's matters would receive a very generous compensation after they came out. This was also why lackeys felt that taking care of the boss's matters was a good thing. Green Wolf looked at Xiao Dao enviously and said, "Master Qing, I'll take care of this with Brother Dao." Du Qing shook his head and said, "Your injuries are very serious. Very soon someone will send you to the hospital for treatment. I also need someone by my side to help. You stay outside and help me." The lackey slapped Green Wolf's shoulder and scolded with a smile. "You brat, you still want to take credit from me? Be careful or I'll break your bones." I don't dare," Green Wolf repeatedly apologized. Not long after, 2 more black off-road vehicles drove over. One car picked up Green Wolf and sent him to the hospital for treatment, while the other car picked up Du Qing, Fang Yan and the others. After they were far away, Xiao Dao called the police. Li Yi sat in the front passenger seat while Fang Yan and Du Qing sat side by side at the back of the car. The off-road vehicle was very spacious, so the two of them didn't feel cramped at all. After a long period of silence, Du Qing's phone rang. He smiled apologetically at Fang Yan, then took out his phone from his pocket and answered. Very quickly he hung up and looked at Fang Yan and said, "The dust has settled." Fang Yan nodded and said with a smile, "Congratulations, Brother Du, for successfully reducing your burden." Li Yi's body trembled, but she resisted the urge to turn around and look. She didn't think that the truth would be even crueler than she had imagined. "Ha," Du Qing sighed softly. "We're all brothers, I can't bear to do this. Qing Yun isn't just your blood and sweat, it's everyone's blood and sweat." Fang Yan comforted him with a gentle voice. "Times have changed, some things need to be put to rest. For Qing Yun, Qing Hong is a heavy burden. Since he can't adapt to this era, he can only abandon him. Only then can Qing Yun have an even more glorious and brilliant future." Du Qing nodded and said, "To be honest, all these years I haven't had a good night's sleep." "Why?" "Because Qing Yun's development is too fast. If it was just like before, I wouldn't be so worried. But as it develops better and better, I feel like it has become a bomb that can explode at any time. At that time, not only me but also the brothers who have followed me for so many years will be blown to smithereens. But it's a market economy now. Everything has its own rules and human strength can't force it. I can't stop Qing Yun's development. In the sea of business, if we don't advance, we'll fall behind. If we don't develop, we'll be eaten up by our competitors. What can I do? I can only lead them to charge forward. On one hand I'm worried, but on the other hand I have to do my best to compete, develop and make money. Master, you haven't been in Huaqing these years, so you don't know a lot of things. I haven't shown my face in public for the past few years, and I rarely show my face in public. Why? It's because I'm afraid that people will remember my face. If you remember my face, won't you be eyeing the Green Cloud Group under my name?" Chaoga mentioned this before, Fang Yan said with emotion. "She said that you haven't had it easy all these years." "Thank you, Miss Liu, for your understanding and appreciation." "Miss Liu hasn't had it easy all these years, she's a rare heroine. I must treat her to a meal if I have the chance." Du Qing said gratefully, "I thought that if I don't show up, I just need to keep a low profile and people won't pay attention to me. That's what I thought, but those people just won't let me go." "You're dragged into this because of me," Fang Yan said guiltily. "If it wasn't for me, they wouldn't have dragged you into this. Maybe Qing Yun is still Qing Yun and doesn't need to suffer such pain. It's true that it started because of you, but I don't blame you. On the contrary, I want to be grateful to you." Du Qing shook his head and said, "I'm hiding like a turtle, but when will this kind of life end? Qing Yun can either not develop, or if it continues to develop at this pace or at a faster speed than it is now, it will touch the core interests of some people sooner or later. At that time, will they let Qing Yun Group snatch food from the tiger's mouth? They will cut Qing Yun into pieces, exposing Qing Yun's heart and liver to the sun. It's very easy for them to do this kind of thing. So, when you told me at the Thousand Leaves Tea House that you would give me what I needed urgently and what I couldn't imagine, I didn't have any room to refuse. I knew what I needed urgently, but at that time I didn't know what I couldn't imagine. Even if we don't do it, others will." Fang Yan said with a smile. Instead of letting others dig out Qing Yun's heart and liver, you might as well break your own limbs. Chapter 5:17. That's right. Du Qing deeply agreed with Fang Yan's words. If we do it ourselves, at least the situation will be under control. The plot is designed by us and the actors are arranged by us. The story is also the story we want. Fang Yan looked at the lights outside the window and said softly, "From now on, Qing Yun can finally go into battle lightly, and Big Brother Du can also sleep well." Du Qing shook his head and said, "If there is a sacrifice, there must be a sacrifice. I personally sent my life and death brothers out, and in the future, I'm afraid that I will wake up from nightmares again and again. They won't forgive me and I can't forgive myself. Life is helpless. I can only try to be optimistic." Fang Yan patted Du Qing's shoulder and said, "Stop by the side of the road." Jie. The car stopped by the side of the road. Fang Yan got off the car and waved his hand at the car. The car started up again. Du Qing sat alone in the back of the carriage, his face as gloomy as the sky outside. Leah looked at Du Qing's face through the rearview mirror. At this time, Du Qing made her feel extremely unfamiliar. Du Qing finally came back to his senses from his deep thoughts. He took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it up. He opened the window a crack and allowed the fishy smell of the night wind to hit his face and said, "Ask whatever you want to ask." "The 13th Master is a good person, isn't he?" Leah asked. "He's my best brother," Du Qing said in a deep voice. "I only saved him once and he gave me his life." "Did the two of you discuss this? You two deliberately instigated those brothers?" Leah's voice rose a little. There were complaints in her heart and there was anger in her heart. Those who were fighting were all her brothers, brothers who had gone through life and death with them. Even if they were real brothers, how much could they give up for each other? But those brothers of theirs, they were willing to die for their big brother. Du Qing fiercely took a drag of the cigarette, allowing the smoke to pass through his lungs and then out of his nostrils. Only then did he feel slightly more comfortable. He looked at Li Ya's excited face and said, "You should have already understood the conversation between me and Fang Yan just now." "I don't understand," Li Ya said with red eyes. "Uncle, must we do this? Must they kill each other? Must we kick them out?" "This is the best choice and the only choice." Du Qing's voice was somewhat hoarse as he said, "This time the majority of those expelled are old brothers who fought with me to conquer the world. To make such a choice, do you think I feel good in my heart? However, if we don't do this, the entire Green Cloud sect will face a calamity. Just because someone caused a few troubles? Just because of the media's condemnation?" "Leah, you are too emotional," Du Qing said softly. "I am as sad as you, but my choice will not be wrong. Uncle, I know your choice won't be wrong." "How could you be wrong? You started your career in your teens and have been in Jianghu for decades. What kind of storms have you not experienced? What kind of crafty plot could deceive you? I know Uncle is very, very powerful and you have always been my idol. In my heart you are the most charming man. However, what I find hard to accept is that those people who called us brothers yesterday were thrown into the rubbish bin by you in the blink of an eye. You are not that kind of person." Du Qing took another puff and flicked the remaining half of the cigarette out of the window. "Green Cloud's predecessor is Qing Hong. You know better than me what Qing Hong does," Du Qing said in a low voice. "Before I took over, Qing Hong already existed. How many dirty and evil things did Qing Hong do? How much blood and human lives did Qing Hong stain itself with? But those things were not done by you. After you took over Green Cloud sect, you have never done those things," Li Ya retorted. "Yes." Du Qing nodded. "You know about these things, 13 also knows about these things. But do the people outside know? Do they know that those things in the past have nothing to do with me? Even if they know that those things have nothing to do with me, are they willing to believe it? That is Qing Hong's original sin. After I took over as the leader of Qing Hong, it also became the original sin that I have to bear. If there is a conflict between the two sides, if there is a conflict of interest between us and them, would they be willing to let go of such a good point of attack? That is a target, our most fatal weakness. As long as they are willing, they can stab us with a knife and take our lives at any time. We don't even have the chance to retaliate. What have I been doing all these years? But can we do that? Xiaoye, Qing Hong is my starting point, it is a part of my body. But Green Cloud is my everything, it is also my future. I will not allow anything to happen to him." I will not allow the business empire that I built up brick by brick to collapse overnight. That kind of blow is too heavy, I can't take it. We can discuss with them, we can communicate with them. Is there any use in discussing? Is there any use in communicating? Du Qing shook his head. Back then when I closed down those black businesses, how much of a retaliation did I receive? Once when my car exploded, I almost lost my life. Do you still remember? When I transferred those gray businesses out, how did they resist me? What crazy things did they do down there? Because those businesses were too profitable, the benefits were enough to make them go crazy, they would do anything for it. Those people could only rely on that to live. Other than that, they have nothing. How do you discuss with them? How do you communicate with them? Is there any use in discussing? Is there any use in communicating? Without sufficient compensation, unable to come up with businesses that are equal or more profitable. Are they willing to accept a settlement? Li, you have also talked to some of them. Have they accepted your plan to settle them down? The undercurrent is surging. I have seen all of these things. At that time I was not in a hurry because the general situation was in my hands, and a large number of brothers supported me. Moreover, I have not been able to make up my mind to clean up. You waited until Du Chun got into trouble before you made up your mind. That's right. Du Chun was the catalyst that made me make up my mind. Du Qing said without hesitation, since they threw Du Chun out as a test, it means that they already have the idea and plan to eradicate us. I know too well what kind of person that man is. If he wants, he can easily push us down into the abyss, let us fall to pieces and never be able to rise again. So all these years you deliberately surrounded the 13th Lord, making them think that the 13th Lord is on their side. They surrounded and united around the 13th Lord, through the 13th Lord's eyes and mouth. You know every word that those traitors say and everything that they do. They are a group of loaches that have long been in the pot of water. The reason why they are still jumping and rolling is because you have not ignited the fire outside. Now that the time is right, you let the 13th Lord suddenly throw a big fire and all of them are roasted. There is no possibility of escape. Du Qing sighed softly. His voice was infinitely sad as he said, Little Ya, I have no children. You also know about Du Chun's situation. His ability is not enough to control Green Cloud Group. In the future, Green Cloud Group can only be entrusted to you. It is fine when I am alive, but if I am not here or if I wait until I am old and can no longer watch over them, with your soft-hearted personality, how can you be a match for those people? They will tear you apart alive. Leah was silent. She knew that what her uncle said was the truth. He had also told her more than once to be prepared. To be prepared to take over Green Cloud Group. Because other than herself he did not have anyone else. Leah also knew that everything her uncle did was for Green Cloud Group. A green cloud that could go into battle lightly, a green cloud that could be freely controlled. It was just that this feeling was really very uncomfortable. Perhaps this was the world of men. The 13th Lord, the reason why the 13th Lord is willing to stand up, is for me and for you, Du Qing said softly. He watched you grow up, he treats you like his own daughter. He will stand up and take responsibility for everything. Li Ya's eyes reddened. She said, The 13th Lord, where is he? He went to turn himself in, Du Qing said. The call I received just now was from him. He has already arranged everything. Do you think the truth is too cruel? Du Qing laughed silently. I also think it's very cruel. Those incidents, the various incidents that happened against our Qing Hong, were they all orchestrated by you and the 13th Lord? That's not it, Du Qing shook his head. Those were done by someone else. They just started and we immediately cooperated with them to finish the show. They must be very satisfied, right? Lord Hu, is Lord Hu not going to save them? Du Qing did not answer Li Ya's question, he only looked at her with a deep gaze. There was an endless amount of things contained within. Li Ya understood Lord Hu had also been abandoned. This was a game of three kingdoms, some were loyal officials, some were spies, some were traitors, some were masters, and Du Qing and Fang Yan were the manipulators of this game. Chapter 518. The teacup in his hand smashed against the wall. Interesting. Really interesting. Jiang Junling's face was extremely gloomy, cold lightning flashed in his eyes. He failed again and again and suffered setbacks again and again. Even with his ability to control his emotions he was a bit annoyed. What is this? This is failure. For Jiang Junling, failure was the hardest thing to accept. It was like Fang Yan slapping him again and again and he didn't even have the space to dodge. Li Yun sighed softly, put down the teacup in her hand, and began to clean up the porcelain shards on the carpet. Seeing Li Yun's plump buttocks when she bent down, Jiang Junling also knew that his behavior was too irrational. He walked over and pulled Li Yun up, smiled and said, "Aunt, I don't dare to let you do this kind of rough work. If Grandpa knew, he would scold me for not respecting my elders." Li Yun threw the porcelain shards in her hand into the trash can and said, "What's this? It's not like I haven't done this kind of thing before. Fine, if you say you don't want to do it, then I won't do it." The two sat down again. Li Yun helped Jiang Junling get a new cup of tea and said, "It seems that this time our efforts are in vain and we're working for someone else. It's all my fault. I was too slow. If I was a bit faster, I'm afraid they wouldn't have been able to escape so easily." Jiang Junling shook his head and said, "Aunt, it's not your fault. We've just started and they've already performed this move in front of us. The arm that was cut off was probably already prepared, right? That Du Qing is really a talent. What a pity." Li Yun knew that Jiang Junling valued Du Qing very much, and previously had the intention of roping him in for his own use. But because Du Qing and Fang Yan had a close relationship, he wasn't sure if he could succeed, so he threw Du Qing's nephew out to test. He didn't expect Fang Yan to be so vicious, directly crippling the arm of Du Qing's nephew, Du Chun. In this way, the possibility of reconciliation between Du Qing and Jiang Junling was almost zero, and Du Qing had placed this deep hatred on Jiang Junling. Since he couldn't be of use to him, then he would use a thunderous method to destroy him. Thus, Jiang Junling handed this matter over to Li Yun to handle. They first used all kinds of negative conflicts to push Qing Hong out from the dark, and then made Qing Hong a street rat that everyone wanted to beat up. When the public opinion and countless netizens focused their attention on Qing Hong and Green Cloud Group, when Qing Hong's old cases and all the shady dealings were dug out by the reporters, they didn't even need to say a word. Naturally, there would be people who would get rid of them. Just like cleaning up a pile of garbage, they would be swept into the cesspool and trash can with lightning speed. At that time, even if Du Qing still stood on Fang Yan's side, so what? It was just an old dog without any value. This plan couldn't be said to be bad, but it also couldn't be said to be not vicious. Most of the time they didn't even need to make a move, they just needed to add fuel to the fire. However, just as this wave started, there was already an even more exciting show on the other side. Now Lu Shisan, an important figure in Qing Hong, turned himself in at the police station and took all the responsibility. What about Du Qing? Du Qing had successfully cleared his name, and was about to take big strides forward with a clean Green Cloud Group. Not only Jiang Junling, but even Li Yun was stunned by the opponent's quick attack. She felt like a clown who worked hard to perform but couldn't get the applause of the audience. "Yeah," Li Yun said. "Du Qing probably wanted to get rid of the heavy burden behind him a long time ago, right? Our actions gave him the best opportunity. If he didn't give his underlings a reason to betray him, how could he legitimately kick those idiots out of Green Cloud Group? Thinking about it makes me angry, but at the same time I feel like I didn't lose unjustly. This kind of opponent deserves respect." Jiang Junling said, "But this doesn't mean he can be safe." Li Yun looked at Jiang Junling with a puzzled expression and asked, "Military order, do you still have other chess pieces that haven't been settled? Let's wait and see." Jiang Junling said with a gentle expression. He held the teacup and took a sip, then said, "We've just reached the middle game. It's still a long time before the decisive battle. I want to see how much power they can explode. I believe that the final victory will be military order." Li Yun said with a smile. When Fang Yan returned home, it was already past 1 in the morning. Fang Yan saw that the light in Lu Chaoga's room was still on, so he knew that she was probably still awake. But it was really not the right time to knock on the door and chat. So Fang Yan entered his room, pulled down the curtains, took off his clothes, filled the bathtub with water, and once again soaked his whole body in the bathtub. After soaking for a few minutes, Fang Yan suddenly heard a muffled bang. The sound was very short, as if someone had heavily stomped on the ground. Splash! Fang Yan lifted his head out of the bathtub. He pricked up his ears and listened attentively, but no more sound came out. Fang Yan thought he heard wrong, so he once again dived his head into the bathtub. Bang! Another muffled sound. This time Fang Yan didn't poke his head out, but still soaked his whole body in the bathtub. He listened quietly, trying to find the source of the sound. But just like before, the sound disappeared. Fang Yan began to wonder if he was hallucinating. Otherwise, how could he hear two muffled sounds in a row? The more he buried his body in the bathtub, the clearer Fang Yen could perceive the outside world. The other noises had disappeared as if the whole world had become a stream. His thoughts soared in the midst of these streams, like a free and happy fish. Hua! Fang Yen suddenly jumped out of the bathtub. He heard a woman's moan. The sound was very weak, but it was very clear in his ears. He ran outside barefooted, but he retreated halfway. It wasn't because he remembered that he forgot to wear shoes, but because he was still naked. Putting on a robe, Fang Yen opened the door and ran to Lu Chaoge's room next door. Fang Yen wasn't sure what the moan was about, so he stood in front of Lu Chaoge's room, knocked on the door and asked in a low voice, "Chaoge, are you asleep?" "No," Lu Chaoge said. Fang Yen was about to ask her if she was okay, but he didn't expect Lu Chaoge to say, "I'm going to sleep, you should go to sleep too." From his voice, one could tell that Lu Chaoge was a little agitated and panicked. This made Fang Yen even more worried, so he couldn't help but ask, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, really fine," Lu Chaoge yelled. "Fang Yen, go to sleep. Don't worry about me." Fang Yen was really worried this time. If she was fine, then she was fine. Why did she have to say that she was really fine? If she was really fine, why would she be so nervous? Also, she said, "Go to sleep, don't worry about me." Why didn't he worry about her? It meant that something had happened to her, but she didn't want Fang Yen to get involved. So Fang Yen called out to Lu Chaoge softly, "I'm glad you're fine. I just came back, I'm going to sleep now." "Go to sleep. It's late," Lu Chaoge said. "See you tomorrow." Fang Yen quickly went back to his room, opened the floor-to-ceiling window and went to his bedroom balcony. Because Fang Yan's and Lu Chaoge's rooms were next to each other, their balconies were very close. Sometimes on a quiet night Fang Yen would be on his balcony and Lu Chaoge would be on hers. They would talk for a while and watch the stars. Fang Yen threw off the cotton slippers on his feet and climbed to the balcony barefoot. He dug the concave lines on the wall and climbed little by little toward Lu Chaoge's room. Fang Yan's actions naturally attracted the attention of the bodyguards in the yard. Qin Ying looked at Fang Yen in shock. It was hard to imagine that he would do such a despicable and shameless thing. Qin Ying was in a difficult position and the other bodyguards were also in a difficult position. If the person who climbed the wall was someone else, they would have shot him in the butt. However, that person was Fang Yen. Moreover, they weren't sure if this was Fang Yan's personal behavior, or if he accepted Lu Chaoge's invitation, or if the two wanted to play a role-playing game. Fang Yen was playing Spider-Man at this time? The bodyguards looked at each other and didn't know how to deal with it. After Fang Yen quietly stood on the balcony on Lu Chaoge's side, he turned to Qin Ying and the others downstairs and made a shushing gesture, indicating that they shouldn't alert the enemy. Qin Ying understood and made a gesture. He and his brothers immediately rushed into the villa. From Fang Yan's expression they understood that Lu Chaoge might be in danger. But when did those thieves sneak in? Could it be that there were still loopholes in their defense downstairs? This was simply impossible. Fang Yen stood on the balcony and reached out to push the floor-to-ceiling window. Lu Chaoge's awareness of security was very good, and the floor-to-ceiling window was locked from the inside. Of course, such a small problem wouldn't be difficult for Fang Yen. He broke a small branch from the flower pot above the railing and picked at the lock. Pop! There was a crisp sound and the window lock had been opened by Fang Yen. At the same time the door lock was opened, Fang Yen had rushed into Lu Chaoge's room at lightning speed. "Don't move," Fang Yen shouted sternly. Lu Chaoge didn't move, but Fang Yen didn't move either. He looked at the scene in front of him and stood there dumbfounded. Things didn't seem to be what he imagined. Chapter 519. Lu Chaoge really didn't move. Because she couldn't move at all. Lu Chaoge usually paid great attention to her health and had a good habit of sleeping early and waking up early. But for some reason Lu Chaoge felt uneasy tonight. She had a feeling that something big was going to happen. Especially when Fang Yen didn't come back until midnight and didn't call to inform her. This made Lu Chaoge especially worried. She knew how dangerous Huaqing was at the moment. She also knew that Jiang Junling was guarding Huaqing and wouldn't leave for a while. She wanted to call and ask, but she felt that it might disturb Fang Yan's work. So after dinner she lay on the sofa in the bedroom and read. She was halfway through a novel when she realized that it was already midnight. She closed the novel and put in a pool of water to soak for a while to relieve her fatigue. Perhaps after soaking in the bath, his irritation would disappear? Because Lu Chaoga's right hand had been pierced by someone and was now in the recovery stage. In Fang Yan's words, the right hand must never touch water. So, soaking in the bath was not an easy thing for Lu Chaoga. She needed to wrap the injured hand in a plastic bag and then lay in the bathtub and put the arm on the edge of the bathtub. Halfway through the bath, she heard the sound of a car engine coming from the courtyard. She knew that Fang Yan was back and her mood improved a lot. She heard Fang Yan go upstairs and Fang Yan pass by her bedroom door. She knew that Fang Yan wouldn't knock on the door and come in, so she didn't have any expectations. When she got up from the bathtub and was about to wipe her body and go to bed, her feet slipped and she fell to the ground. Pain. Her knee hurt, her arm hurt, and her whole body hurt. If it weren't for her perseverance, she would have been tearing up. Lu Chaoga lay on the ground for a while until the pain in her body subsided and she regained the strength to move her hands and feet. Only then did she prepare to get up from the cold ground. She couldn't exert force with one hand, and her other arm didn't have much strength because of the injury. Just as he propped his upper body up, his palm slipped and his body fell to the ground again. This time he only landed on his chest. But it was even more painful. The pain was excruciating. Although there were 2 lumps of soft flesh in front of her chest to cushion the pain, soft flesh was still flesh and soft flesh could still hurt. She felt that the 2 lumps of fat were no longer hers, and she had a strong urge to cut them off and give them to someone else. This time Lu Xiaoga's tears really fell down. She had never thought that being hit in the chest would hurt so much. Even when that lady boy pierced his palm with a dagger, it wasn't as unbearable as this, right? After shedding a few tears, Lu Chaoga began to think about her next move. She couldn't keep lying on the ground. Not only would it aggravate her injury, but the floor was cold and it was very likely to make her sick. She felt pain all over her body. One of her hands couldn't be used and the other couldn't be used either. Even her chest couldn't be used anymore. Otherwise, her body could be propped up. What should she do now? Call for help? The nanny lived on the first floor. If she called for help, she might alarm the whole courtyard, including Fang Yan, who lived in the next room. However, in her current situation, she couldn't get up to make a phone call. If she could make a phone call, she didn't need help. Ask for Fang Yan's help? That was even worse. She just got out of the bathtub. Except for the shower cap on her head and the plastic bag tied to her hands, she could be said to be naked. In such a situation, how could she ask Fang Yan to come in and help? She was afraid that the more he helped, the worse it would be. When Lu Chaoga was in a dilemma, Fang Yan appeared at the door of her room as if he had sensed it. When Fang Yan asked her if she had slept, her whole body tightened, and her face was burning as if she was standing naked in front of Fang Yan and being peeped at by him. She was worried that Fang Yan would suddenly barge in after knowing that she was in trouble, so she hurriedly said that she was fine and asked Fang Yan to hurry back to sleep and not care about her. But she didn't know that the more she acted like this, the more suspicious Fang Yan became. Since the last time Lu Chaoga was kidnapped by Qiang Long Tan, everyone raised her safety to the highest level. Especially Fang Yan. He would not allow Lu Chaoga to encounter even the slightest danger. After he misunderstood Lu Chaoga's words, he naturally tried to find out what was going on. It would be best if he could attack the gangsters by surprise. They were indeed caught off guard. However, it was Lu Chaoga and Fang Yan themselves who were caught off guard. Lu Chaoga's mouth was wide open and her head was slightly raised. For a moment she didn't know how to react. And Fang Yan was even more shocked. This was completely different from what he had imagined. Where were the gangsters? Where the hell were the gangsters? Where did they hide? Fang Yan wanted to crawl under the bed and check to see if the gangsters were hiding. Therefore, the second Fang Yan came in, Lu Chaoga and Fang Yan maintained such an extremely strange posture. Lu Xiaoga's naked body was lying on the floor. Her smooth and jade-like body was covered with water droplets. Her plump buttocks, those curvy curves. Fang Yan could only keep swallowing his saliva. One mouthful after another, he didn't know why he suddenly felt so thirsty. The first person to react was Lu Chaoga. Lu Chaoga simply put her face on the floor and didn't dare to look at Fang Yan's eyes. She hurriedly said, "I'm fine, you go out." Fang Yan nodded and said, "You're really fine, then I'll go out first." After that, Fang Yan turned around and walked toward the balcony. He had just jumped over here, so he had to jump back out of habit. Seeing that Fang Yan really turned around and left, Lu Chaoga's mouth opened and she didn't know what to say. Is he really going to leave like this? If he just leaves like this, Will I have to lie on the floor for the whole night? Fang Yan finally thought of this problem. When he thought of this problem, Fang Yan had already jumped to the balcony of Lu Chaoga's bedroom and was about to jump over to his side. Because he thought of this problem, Fang Yan jumped down from the balcony again. He rushed back to Lu Chaoga's room like a gust of wind. Without saying goodbye to Lu Chaoga, he bent down and reached out to pick up Lu Chaoga from the floor. He threw Lu Chaoga's body on the big bed and pulled a quilt to cover her body. Only then did he feel a little relieved. He still liked Lu Chaoga with clothes on. Fang Yan finally had the courage to look at Lu Chaoga and said, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Lu Chaoga wanted to bury her head in the quilt. The scene just now was too embarrassing. Although she was lying on the floor at that time, it could be imagined that when Fang Yan picked her up from the floor he must have seen her back. In all honesty, Fang Yan really didn't peek. It wasn't peek, it was openly looking. After all, if you don't use your eyes to find the target, how can you pick someone up from the floor? "You're fine after falling like this? You didn't even call me? If I didn't barge in, were you going to lie on the floor for the whole night?" Fang Yan said with blame. Lu Chaoga was speechless. "In such a situation, how could I call you over to help? Besides, I didn't call you, but didn't you barge in yourself?" Fang Yan understood Lu Chaoga's mentality and said, "Are you hurt? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "Yes," Lu Chaoga said. Her knee hurt and it seemed to be bleeding. Her chest hurt even more, as if someone cut a piece of flesh. "Where do you feel uncomfortable?" "Calf," Lu Chaoga said. Fang Yan walked over to lift the quilt. Lu Chaoga panicked and said, "What are you going to do?" "Look at your leg," Fang Yan said. "I accidentally glanced at your knee just now and noticed that the skin on your knee is broken. I'll help you apply some ointment." "Give me the ointment, I'll apply it myself," Lu Chaoga said. "You don't have to be polite with me," Fang Yan said domineeringly. "You can't move one hand and you can't even open the bottle cap. How are you going to apply it?" As Fang Yan spoke, he had already lifted a small corner of the quilt. Lu Chaoga's calf was exposed in front of Fang Yan. The skin on her knee was broken and blood was oozing out. In just a moment, the white velvet quilt was stained with some blood. When Fang Yan was about to go downstairs to find the golden chrysalis muscle nourishing powder to wipe Lu Chaoga's wound, there was a goo 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 sound outside the door. This was a secret signal. It was a secret signal sent by Qin Ying. Fang Yan's sneaky climbing over the wall made Qin Ying and the others think that something had happened to Lu Chaoga. They waited at the door and couldn't rush in. They were worried that they would alarm the bandits or disturb Fang Yan and Lu Chaoga. "Qin Ying, it's safe inside," Fang Yan said aloud. Qin Ying shouted at the door, "Is Miss Lu okay?" "I'm fine." Fang Yan shouted, "You guys go downstairs." So there was no movement at the door. Fang Yan looked at Lu Chaoga embarrassedly and said, "When I climbed over the wall, I was accidentally discovered by them." Lu Chaoga didn't know what to say. Fang Yan climbed over the wall in the middle of the night. In the eyes of the bodyguards below, perhaps everyone would have the same guess in their hearts. And most of the bodyguards below were sent by the Qin family. In other words, the matter between her and Fang Yan might have reached the ears of the Qin family. Thinking of this possibility, Lu Chaoga actually felt a little happy in her heart. She should know about Qin Yitian, right? Chapter 520. When Fang Yan went downstairs, Qin Ying and the others had disappeared. It was as if they had never entered the house. These people were all professional bodyguards. They knew when to disappear and where to hide. Fang Yan took the unfinished golden chrysalis muscle nourishing powder in the living room, and then returned to Lu Chaoga's room again. Lu Chaoga was still lying on the bed without moving. When Fang Yan left, she also wanted to get up and put on a nightgown. She even wanted to find a piece of underwear to bind the tender flesh on her chest. However, because the two tumbles were too heavy, her body couldn't move after falling on the soft bed. Therefore, when Fang Yan went downstairs and went upstairs again, she could only cover her body tightly with the quilt. Fang Yan sat on the bed and lifted a corner of the quilt covering Lu Chaoga's calf. He said, "I will help you apply some medicine. Don't let it scar. If such a beautiful long leg has a scar, you can't wear a short skirt in summer." Because Lu Chaoga often wore professional clothes, short skirts were standard equipment. When she wore a short skirt with silver, white, black, coffee, or plaid stripes, the charm of a mature woman could be fully displayed. When Fang Yan met her for the first time, although he felt that this person's character was very arrogant, He knew that she must not be a bad person. How could God be willing to let a bad person look like this? Hearing Fang Yan praise her beautiful legs, Lu Chaoga's heart was sweet. Thinking that she was completely naked now, as long as he lifted the quilt a little bit, the most private part of a woman would be exposed to Fang Yan, Lu Chaoga couldn't help but clamp her thighs. Her face was red and her eyes could drip water. She had to think about a problem. If Fang Yan really did that kind of thing, should I push him away angrily or slap him first and then push him away angrily? If she did that, wouldn't he feel embarrassed? Would their relationship fall into an impasse in the future? Would Fang Yan's heart, which had just opened a gap, close again? But if he didn't do that, what if he did something even crazier? Do I really have to give it to him? While Lu Chaoga's imagination was running wild, Fang Yan had already dipped a cotton swab in disinfectant to reduce the inflammation on the broken skin. Hiss! Lu Chaoga was in so much pain that her body trembled and she couldn't help but want to curl up. Women are very strange creatures. When their boyfriends are by their side, they can't even unscrew the cap of a mineral water bottle. But when they were alone in their own homes, they could roll up their sleeves and throw a bucket of water over the water dispenser. When they were on the ship, the chief god had used a knife to pierce through Lu Chaoga's palm. She didn't even try to dodge. Instead, she looked like she was facing death with equanimity. Now Fang Yan just used disinfectant to disinfect her wound, and she felt unbearable pain. She wanted to open her mouth and scream, "Just bear with it." Fang Yan helped Lu Chaoga disinfect and comforted her softly. "I used to think that you were very good at taking care of people, but look at you now. You've taken care of yourself like this. You can't move one hand and you can't move both legs. Don't get out of bed tomorrow. I'll make breakfast for you. What do you want to eat for lunch? I'll go to the supermarket to buy some groceries when I come back from work. You must remember, don't touch water. Don't let the wound get inflamed." "I'm fine," Lu Chaoga said. "It's just that the floor was slippery, so I accidentally fell." After disinfecting, Fang Yan picked out the ointment and gently applied it on Lu Chaoga's knee. He smiled and asked, "If I hadn't barged in when I realized that something was wrong, were you planning to lie on the ground like this for the whole night?" Lu Chaoga wished she could cover her head with a blanket or Fang Yan's head with it. She whispered, "I'll be able to get up by myself after lying down for a while. What if you can't get up?" Fang Yan was actually trying to find something to talk about. He was nervous. He was really nervous. This worried him more than the burden reduction plan that he had single-handedly manipulated Qingyun. This was even more exhausting than fighting with the two Japanese ninjas. In this world, not every man was like Lu Xiaohui, who could sit still even when he was in love. He admitted that he was a man with very strong willpower, but Lu Chaoga was also a charming and alluring goddess. Which man didn't want to have a relationship beyond friendship with a goddess? Which man didn't want to put his mark on a beautiful woman? Fang Yan also had the same idea. And Fang Yan still had such an opportunity. In his mind, the erotic scene when he barged in replayed over and over again. Lu Chaoga's skin was whiter than ice and snow, and her body was sexier than the devil's. Every inch of her skin was a pleasant surprise and every part of her body was flawless. He couldn't get rid of it. He couldn't bear to get rid of it. He knew that he could do a lot of things. He only needed to lift the blanket on Lu Chaoga a little bit and then he could lift it up to Lu Chaoga's neck. If he said that he wanted to help check other parts of Lu Chaoga's body to see if there were any injuries, she shouldn't object, right? After all, he did it out of sincerity. Lu Chaoga, who was lying on the bed, was a pile of dry firewood. Fang Yan, who was carefully helping Lu Chaoga apply the ointment, was a raging fire. Fang Yan only needed to move his body closer and make a slight reaction, and he could make that pile of dry firewood burn. Bring light and warmth to a woman. Wasn't this the mission of a flame? However, Fang Yan just couldn't open his mouth to let her know that he couldn't do it and let her shout, "It's so hot." Fang Yan wiped the sweat on his forehead with the sleeve of his robe and said with a smile, "Isn't the atmosphere in the room too intimate?" "I'm not intimate," Lu Chaoga said. She was also very hot. Not only was her body hot, but she also had to cover her hot body with a very warm mattress. "No?" Fang Yan was stunned and said, "Maybe the weather is getting hotter. Autumn in Huaqing is like this. It's the same as summer in the north." Lu Chaoga replied with a and didn't say anything else. Fang Yan didn't say anything else and just focused on helping Lu Chaoga apply the ointment. Every time he applied the cool ointment, Lu Chaoga's body would tremble slightly. Sometimes Fang Yan's fingers accidentally touched Lu Chaoga's body, and Lu Chaoga's body would tremble even more intensely. When the passion was at its peak, just a glance could make one orgasm. Fang Yan applied the ointment on both of Lu Chaoga's knees that were scratched, and then carefully wrapped them with gauze. "It's done," Fang Yan said with a smile. After finishing the work at hand, there was actually a faint regret in his heart. In the future he would never have the chance to look at Lu Chaoga's thighs so openly, nor would he be able to gently touch them with his fingers. He couldn't let someone fall every day, right? Although Fang Yan did have the ability to do so. However, with Lu Chaoga's physique, if she fell too many times, wouldn't she become disabled? Lu Chaoga replied with another, This sound was like a moan coming from her throat. Fang Yan looked at the motionless Lu Chaoga lying there and asked softly, "Is there any other place?" Worried that Lu Chaoga would misunderstand, Fang Yan quickly explained, "What I mean is, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere else?" "I'm fine," Lu Chaoga said. Fang Yan felt a bit regretful in his heart. How could she be fine? So Fang Yan put the ointment, gauze, scissors and other items on the bed into the medicine box. He carried the box and got up from the bed and said, "Then you have a good rest. I'm going back to sleep." Lu Chaoga replied in a low voice. Fang Yan smiled and carried the medicine box to leave. He reached for the doorknob and was about to open the door to leave when Lu Chaoga suddenly called out, "Fang Yan." Fang Yan's body was shocked and he asked softly, "Is there anything else?" "I want to drink water," Lu Chaoga said. Fang Yan retreated again, ran to pour a cup of warm water and fed it to Lu Chaoga. When Lu Chaoga drank the water, the way she looked at Fang Yan was very strange. Fang Yan didn't understand and thought, "Did she see through my wretched thoughts?" After returning to his room, Fang Yan was still thinking about the deep meaning in Lu Chaoga's eyes. An idea flashed through his mind and he slapped himself hard in the face. She wants to drink water. Xianxia had a dream. In the dream, she accompanied Fang Yan to walk around Yanjing City in circles. They walked past the red walls and white tiles, the streets and alleys, the majestic Xuanwu Gate and the dilapidated and heavy bell tower. They didn't speak but occasionally looked at each other in the eyes, which made people feel sweet inside, as if they would fly into the sky like fairies if they stamped their feet. Outside a red wall, Fang Yan stopped. Because there was a red plum blossom sticking out of the wall, as if it was curiously looking at the world. Fang Yan jumped lightly and picked the plum blossom in his hand. He walked over step by step, and then under the shy and happy gaze of Xianxia, he inserted the plum blossom in her hair. Xianxia smiled happily and her voice was like a silver bell that spread far and wide. She reached out to touch the plum blossom but she grabbed a handful of sticky things. She opened her palm to look and her hand was actually a large amount of bright red blood. Xianxia was frightened and wanted to throw the plum blossom away, but the plum blossom branch had disappeared, and only a large amount of sticky blood flowed down along her hair and cheeks. Xianxia suddenly woke up from her sleep, opened her eyes and thought about the strange and terrifying story just now. Why did the plum blossom turn into a large amount of bright red blood? What was the meaning behind it? Xianxia was puzzled, so she simply lifted the quilt and walked to the window to look at the bright moonlight outside. Beep. The phone on the desk vibrated. Xianxia took the phone and glanced at it. She received a message. After reading the content of the message, she replied, "Don't do it again." She turned off the phone and Xianxia stood in front of the window with her arms crossed. She thought, "Flower City, it's time to go back and take a look." Chapter 521. When Fang Yan got out of bed and went to the backyard to practice, Qining was already training his body. Both of them were martial artists, so they naturally had the intention to compete with each other. On a morning when the sun was just rising, Qining issued a challenge to Fang Yan, or perhaps it was a provocation. After promising Fang Yan that he would not hit his face or kick his crotch, the two of them finally got entangled with each other with excited expressions. Qining pounced towards Fang Yan, but was flung away again. Saying it like that was too simple and perfunctory. There was no excitement of fists hitting flesh. The actual situation was like this. Qining pounced towards Fang Yan with a ferocious tiger catching its prey. Fang Yan's body was like a willow in the wind, like duckweed in the water. When drunken crane rides the wind was displayed, Qining had no way of touching his body. Qin Ying threw more than 10 punches and kicked more than 20 times. After being spun around a few times by Fang Yan, he finally lost his patience and roared, "If you have the ability, fight me with real bullets." Thus, Fang Yan used a drunken crane grabbing worms to grab Qin Ying and throw him away. Qin Ying flew far away and lay on the ground for a long time, unable to get up. From then on, Qin Ying woke up every morning to train with Fang Yan. Learning from others despite being ashamed, it could be considered as an improvement. Morning. Fang Yan smiled and took the initiative to greet Qin Ying. Morning, Qin Ying said. He was doing push-ups with one hand and looked very relaxed. In the past, when Qin Ying trained, when his training volume reached a certain level, he would start sweating profusely, and even his breathing would become rapid. Later on, Fang Yan taught him a breathing method. He used the breathing method taught by Fang Yan during training, and the effect was extremely obvious. Not only did it improve his physical fitness, but after training his face did not turn red and his heart did not beat. It was as if he could run dozens of kilometers. When Qin Ying greeted Fang Yan, the way he looked at Fang Yan was very strange. Fang Yan glanced at Qin Ying and knew what he was thinking. He explained seriously, "What happened last night is not what you think. What are we imagining?" Qin Ying asked. "Just pretend I didn't say anything." Fang Yan pursed his lips and began to stand up. Qin Ying jumped up from the lawn and walked to Fang Yan's side to practice his stance. Ever since he lost to Fang Yan, he felt that everything Fang Yan did was a treasure. A secret martial art manual that would never be leaked to outsiders. "Can you be more careful next time? Or, can you give us a heads up the next time you want to climb over the wall?" Qin Ying lowered his voice and reminded her. He was worried that his words would be heard by Lu Chaoge and cause her to be disgusted. "Do you know how dangerous this is? Fortunately, we found out in time and knew that the person who climbed the wall was you. If we mistook you for a rapist who sneaked in or a kidnapper, we would have shot you in the ass. Wouldn't the consequences be serious?" Fang Yan thought about it and felt that what Qin Ying said was indeed very reasonable. Qin Ying and the others were Lu Chaoge's full-time bodyguards and were responsible for Lu Chaoge's safety. Last time when Qin Zhaoge was kidnapped, they had already been scolded by the main family. Even Scholar, who was specially sent by the Qin family to protect Lu Chaoge, was called back to Yanjing because of a major mistake. The movement of the grass around them could arouse their sensitive nerves. Climbing the wall to see Lu Chaoge in the early hours of the morning was easy to cause misunderstanding, and it would also increase the difficulty of their protection. If they really shot him in the ass, then he would really be wronged. So Fang Yan nodded and said, "Don't worry. In the future such a thing will not happen again." After a pause he said aloud, "If such a thing really happens, I will definitely tell you in advance. Thank you for your understanding." Qin Ying said, "You can play the nurse and the patient, the police and the thief, the student and the teacher, or the teacher and the student. Why do you have to be Spider-Man? Isn't the difficulty a little too high?" Fang Yan suddenly remembered that he hadn't sparred with Qin Ying for a long time. So Fang Yan waved at Qin Ying and said, "Come, let me see if you have improved recently." Qin Ying was shocked and turned to run to the front yard. Fang Yan's figure flashed and he was already in front of him. With a kick he sent him flying. After Fang Yan finished his morning exercise every morning, he began to busy himself in the kitchen. He made porridge and fried eggs, baked a few pieces of bread and cut a few fruits to make a salad. As he was about to put the food on a tray and send it to Lu Chaoge's room upstairs, Lu Chaoge came down by herself. Lu Xiaoge was wearing a set of loose white sportswear. He held the railing as he walked down the stairs carefully. Fang Yan was shocked and quickly ran to support Lu Chaoge and said, "Didn't I tell you last night? I told you to stay in bed and not go downstairs. I've already made breakfast and was about to send it to you." Lu Chaoge enjoyed Fang Yan's thoughtfulness and said softly, "I tried it and my calf doesn't hurt as much as last night. Besides, I can't stay in bed, I want to get up and walk around. I don't even want to do anything." "Then let's have breakfast together," Fang Yan said and supported Lu Chaoge to the dining room. He took the initiative to help her pull out the chair, let her sit down slowly and then put a bowl of hot porridge in front of her. Looking at the busy Fang Yan, Lu Chaoge had a warm and happy smile on her face. She really enjoyed her current life. After so many years of ups and downs, she was like an iceberg in the sea, in danger of sinking to the bottom of the sea or breaking into pieces at any time. She really wanted to settle down. Unfortunately, she also knew very well that this was only temporary. After taking care of Lu Chaoga, Fang Yen sat opposite to eat porridge and asked aloud, "Did you sleep well last night?" "Very well," Lu Chaoga said. She didn't sleep last night and woke up early this morning. She felt that every part of her body was very uncomfortable. It wasn't her knees, elbows or chest, but she didn't know where it was. "I slept well," Fang Yen said. After the two had breakfast, Fang Yen cleaned up the dishes and went upstairs to change. Lu Chaoga was working in the living room. She didn't go to the company during this time, but some of the company's general matters were still decided by her. Fang Yen cleaned up and went downstairs. When he walked to Lu Chaoga, he slowed down and asked, "Do you still want water?" "What?" Lu Chaoga held a glass of lemonade in her hand and asked. Nothing." Fang Yen strode outside and said, "If you're thirsty, call me. I'll bring you water." When Fang Yen appeared at his work again, he found that the problem today was more serious than before. The table was full of flowers. Baldy and the other two colleagues looked at him as if he was a god, as if it was their first time meeting him. "These flowers," Baldy pointed at the flowers on the table and the bunch of flowers on the table that couldn't be placed on the ground and said, "They're all for you." Before Fang Yen came, Baldy and Jing Yong had carefully identified the flowers. None of these flowers were for them, not a single one. "Why are those children so lacking in manners?" "Clean them up," Fang Yen said with a frown. He didn't like this situation. He didn't want to attract attention. He just wanted to be a quiet security guard. If he became the focus of the school again because of his outstanding performance, then he could only give up this job. What he needed wasn't these flowers and girls' pursuit. What he needed was to find a place where he could clear his mind and let his hostility dissipate so that he could study the heart of Tai Chi. The reason why he left Swallow Dock and Yenjing was because he knew that Rosefinch Secondary was such a place. And the last time he revived the heart of Tai Chi, it was also from this place. Talk to those students? It shouldn't have any effect. He had such an experience before. He talked to Qin Etian countless times, but it ended up like this. Talk to the school's leaders? If Fang Yen was willing, from the school's principal Zhong Dei to every teacher in the school, they would be willing to solve his problems. If they were willing to help, they could definitely stop the enthusiasm of those students. But Fang Yen didn't want to do that. He didn't want to make this matter too complicated, and he didn't want to make it too official. Students of this age had a strong sense of self-esteem and were very sensitive to everything. If it wasn't solved properly, it would cause them to go to extremes in the future. Clean them up. Baldy looked at Fang Yen and asked, "How do you want to clean them up?" "Whatever," Fang Yen said. "Throw them into the trash can or send them somewhere else." Baldy was overjoyed and asked, "Can I give them to someone else?" "You can," Fang Yen said. Fang Yen took out today's newspaper and flipped through it. Sure enough, there was a report on the Qinghong incident. However, the content of the report was that the evil had already been eradicated, and the dark faction members had realized their mistakes and surrendered themselves. A storm that had just started was dealt with so quickly and decisively. Surely a lot of people wouldn't want to accept this, right? Wouldn't they? Fang Yen tapped his fingers on the table, thinking, since you started this game, let's make it even more exciting. Using Hua City as the chessboard, using the people as the chess pieces, gambling to the death. Fang Yen closed the newspaper in his hand and said, "I'm going out for a walk." "Where are you going?" "There's going to be a patrol." "I'm going to talk to the principal," Fang Yen said. Chapter 522. Fang Yen didn't want to go to the principal's office to talk to him. If it wasn't necessary, he didn't want others to know that he had a close relationship with the principal. With his current status and achievements, he really didn't need this kind of thing to make himself look good. He received a call from Zhong Dei on his way to work. Zhong Dei asked him to come to his office for a chat. He had just started work in the morning and Zhong Dei looked very busy. After making a few calls, he put down the phone and explained to Fang Yen, "It's been so many days since school started, and there are still people who want to send their children to our school. Some of them are rejected directly and some of them can't be rejected directly, so I have to make a phone call to explain. In the past, everyone called me Zhong de Pao. I said whatever I wanted and scolded whoever I wanted. Now that I'm at Rosefinch, I have to tuck my tail between my legs and behave myself." Fang Yen smiled and said, "A selfless heart is the greatest blessing in the world. Principal Zhong has a selfish heart now." "Yes, I have a selfish heart now." Zhong Dei nodded and sat opposite Fang Yen. He held the tea that his assistant had brought and said, "In the past when I was in Ivy League I had to compete with Rosefinch, Brown and even with number 1 high school, number 2 high school, Huaqing High School, Wuxia Normal University High School and other public schools. It's different now. Rosefinch is already the top private high school, and we don't have to compete with other private high schools anymore. Even compared to those public schools, our enrollment rate and the overall quality of our students are among the best. The more this is the case, the more careful I have to be and the more I have to tuck my tail between my legs." Zhong Dei took a sip of tea and said, "I like the phrase, dare to be the first in the world. But I have to admit that the bird that stands out is more in line with our current situation. Our Rosefinch Secondary is the best private school in Huaqing, and we have the intention of expanding to the whole country. At this time, we have to be more careful." "Principal Zhong, I'm sorry." Fang Yan smiled and said, "Who asked you to be so capable? I invited you here to suffer." Zhong Dei laughed heartily and said, "Fang Yan, your words prove that you have never wholeheartedly devoted yourself to your career. If he was doing something he dreamed of doing, how could he feel that it was hard? When you were a teacher at Rosefinch Secondary, you single-handedly promoted the reform of Rosefinch and even the entire Huaqing language system. You put in so much time and energy. Did you think it was hard at that time?" "I won't." Zhong Dei waved his hand and resolutely said, "I'm willing to do what I like no matter how tiring it is. To be able to see the revival of education is the greatest hope of my life. So, not only do I not feel tired, I also want to thank you and old Zhang. If it weren't for your kind invitation, if it weren't for old Zhang's benevolent demeanor, I, Zhong Dei, would not be able to enjoy such pleasure for a while. Those who served the country and the people were all great heroes." Zhang Xiaofeng had his own selfish motives, but he was still able to weigh the pros and cons in the face of major issues. Zhong Dei wholeheartedly wanted to revitalize the education in Huaqing. He wanted to train the students into talents with comprehensive development of morality, intelligence and physique or practical talents. What he was most afraid of was teachers who only cared about credits and used rigid textbooks to teach a group of nerdy students. They could memorize obscure ancient texts, but couldn't distinguish wheat from onions. They could draw a map of the world but didn't dare to take a trip around their own small city. They could remember the famous words of ancient and modern sages, but didn't know how to pour a cup of hot tea in a bowl of hot rice for their parents. To him it was a national disaster. So, Zhong Dei had been working hard for this and often wrote articles to discuss the reform of education. Unfortunately, these articles did not attract the attention of the relevant people. Even so, Fang Yan still admired this kind of man. Because when others were silent, he was willing to stand up and make a sound. Sometimes speaking the truth was a kind of courage. How many people had such courage? "No matter what, you still have to take care of your body." Fang Yan advised him seriously, "I know that Rosefinch has more and more problems, and I also know that you have too much pressure on your shoulders. Do you still remember? The first time we met it was not a happy time. But the first time we met I felt that you were the leader that our Rosefinch Secondary needs. Later I discussed this matter with Headmaster Zhang and he also felt that you are very suitable. It is not easy to find a suitable leader. If you get sick from exhaustion, I don't have much confidence that you can maintain the results that you have achieved all these years." "That's not right, you think too highly of me," Zhong Dei said with a smile. "Whether I am here or not, Rosefinch is still Rosefinch. All these years, Headmaster Zhang and I have been doing one thing, which is to make management procedures. As long as there is a scientific and perfect management system and a rigorous and responsible supervision system, Rosefinch Secondary will be able to make great strides forward. And it will not be led astray because of one or a few people's incompetence or wrong decisions. However, I still like your praise for me." "That's the other way around," Fang Wei said with a smile. "You are the headmaster and I am just a security guard. You should be the one praising my work. How can a security guard praise a headmaster?" "Who said that a security guard can't praise a headmaster? Even a security guard is willing to praise a headmaster, which proves that I am a competent headmaster. Besides, didn't you say that there is no distinction between high and low professions? Why are there differences between a headmaster and a security guard now?" Fang Yan looked at Zhong Dei and asked, "Headmaster Zhong also knows about this?" "Yes. It has such a big impact, how could I not know?" Zhong Dei looked at Fang Yan and said, "Last night when I was having dinner with the army chief, he told this matter as a joke at the dinner table. He said that his soldiers are unruly and rarely listen to people. I didn't expect that when it comes to our rosefinch, they would be convinced by a small security guard. There are only a few people in the security office and my first reaction was that it was you. I asked someone and sure enough it was you. Just a few jokes. I hope I didn't cause any trouble for the school, Fang Yan said with a smile. Zhong Dei looked at Fang Yan with burning eyes and said, Fang Yan, you are talented. You are also caring. Every word you said touched the bottom of my heart. I think that if anyone can understand me, you will understand best. We are comrades in arms, brothers with the same ideals and goals. Fang Yan, you really don't want to consider my suggestion. I know you can do a good job as a security guard, but you can do more things. If you are willing, I will give you the position of headmaster of Rosefinch Secondary. Here he goes again. This was not the first time they talked about this. Last time Fang Yan had clearly refused. When Fang Yan received Zhong Dei's call, he had already guessed his purpose. Sure enough, his guess was getting more and more accurate. Zhong Dei once again put forward a suggestion to change his job. Fang Yan pondered for a moment, then looked at Zhong Dei and said, I want to take revenge. What? Zhong Dei was stunned and asked, Revenge? Yes. I want to take revenge, Fang Yan said with a smile. My father died so unjustly, I want to take revenge for him. Zhong Dei raised his eyebrows and said, shouldn't this kind of thing be handled by the police? According to normal people's point of view, if someone in the family was injured or tragically injured, it should be reported to the police. What's the point of taking revenge? This matter needs to be handled by me, Fang Yan explained. You can take revenge while working. Zhong Dei said, you can also look for the murderer while working. Both won't delay. Zhong Dei thought that the revenge Fang Yan mentioned was to find a way to find evidence, so he made this suggestion. There is a beast hiding inside my body. If I don't let this beast out, I might hurt myself. But if I let this beast out in the school, it might hurt the students. So, I can't accept your invitation, Zhong Dei said with a face full of regret. You're a genius in education. What a pity. Fang Yan smiled and said, when my heart calms down again, I might go back to school to teach. I'll wait for you to come back. Zhong Dei nodded and said, yesterday I talked to Director Lu on the phone. I was going to submit a report to her, but she said that the matter of Rosefinch Secondary should be discussed with you. Really? Fang Yan was stunned and asked, what is it? Zhong Dei walked back to his desk and took a document and said, take a look first. Fang Yan took the document and glanced at it. On it were the words Rosefinch Brand Expansion Plan. Fang Yan didn't open the folder and read it carefully. Instead he looked at Zhong Dei and asked, you mean, to build a branch campus? That's right. Zhong Dei smiled and nodded. I think it's time to take this step. Why? Rosefinch's brand has matured. Now not only the parents of students in Huaqing want to send their children to Rosefinch to study, but parents of students in other cities also want to send their children to Rosefinch to study. Our Rosefinch's brand influence has been built. Rosefinch's reputation is well known, and Rosefinch Secondary School can't accommodate so many people. Why don't we take this opportunity to take a step forward? Building a Rosefinch Secondary in every first-tier city in the country is something I've always wanted to do. Fang Yan could see the excitement in Zhong Dei's bones and the undisguised excitement in his eyes. When he looked at Fang Yan, he was a little worried that Fang Yan would reject his proposal. This was an aggressive man. He was willing to burn all his energy and wisdom for his career. I agree, Fang Yan said with an extremely solemn tone. Chapter 523. What? Li Yun almost jumped out of her seat. Why is there a traffic jam? Li Yun couldn't be bothered to flirt with her daughter anymore. She pressed down on the window and looked at the long line of cars in front of her. She said angrily, the traffic of a city represents the level of governance of the city. The traffic jam appeared out of nowhere. It proves that the leadership of the city is not good enough. Because she was too anxious, Li Yun could only vent her anger on the city manager. Li Yun looked at her watch. There were only 20 minutes left until the signing ceremony. They were going to report to the media about the signing ceremony of the 3 companies. She was the person in charge of Wuxia Investment Group. She could be said to be the main organizer and initiator. If she couldn't get to the venue in time, what would happen to the signing ceremony? Should he postpone the time or find someone else to stand up and replace him? If she delayed it, the auspicious hour would be missed. The old master of the Lan family still believed in these supernatural things. He had specially asked a master to look at it. Finding another person to stand up and sign on his behalf, although it was just a statement, the people outside would interpret it differently. Everyone knew that Jiang Zhuliu's Longtu group had the unconditional support of the Jiang family and the limited cooperation of the Lan family. If the Jiang family didn't appear in the signing ceremony jointly organized by the three families, how would others view Jiang Zhulu? How would they view the Jiang family? Or rather, how would they interpret the relationship between the two families? Li Yun glanced at the assistant in the front passenger seat and said, "Jiang Shifeng, go out and see what's going on." "Yes, madam." The man in glasses got out of the car and walked forward quickly. Soon Jiang Shifeng went back to the front passenger seat and said, "Madam, they said there was a car accident in front. A few cars had a series of collisions." "Oh my God." Li Yun touched her forehead. If it was a normal traffic accident, they might be able to pass after waiting for a few minutes. However, if it was a series of collisions, the situation would be very troublesome. If there were casualties, it was very likely that the traffic would be blocked for a few hours. "Jiang Shifeng, call the mayor of Huaqing." Li Yun said, "Ask them to solve this problem immediately." "Madam, I'm afraid we don't have enough time," Jiang Shifeng reminded. "Even if Mayor Zhang calls the traffic police to deal with it, we won't have enough time." "Are there any other routes?" Li Yun asked. "There's a subway line that can reach it," General Shifeng said. "Get out." Before Li Yun could finish her sentence, she was the first to open the door and jump out. Xianxia and Shifeng followed closely behind. They did not dare to let Li Yun squeeze into the subway alone. Looking at the dense crowd in front of her, Li Yun felt a little dizzy. She had never squeezed into a subway before. She thought that by buying a ticket she could quickly wait for a train, and then the train would rumble forward with them. That wasn't the case at all right? All the ticket vending machines had long queues and all the ticket booths were overcrowded. It would take at least a few minutes to get a ticket. However, in this world things were easy with money. The young men who blocked Shifeng took out a few bills from their pockets and handed them over, saying, "Young man, we are in a hurry. Can we buy the tickets in your hands?" The young people had enough time but not too much money, so they immediately agreed to the deal that seemed very fair to them. General Shifeng brought Li Yun and Xianxia into the subway station. They didn't have to wait for long before a train arrived. When Shifeng finally escorted Li Yun and Xianxia onto the train, he realized that there were no seats on the train. Not only were there no seats, but it was also very crowded to stand. People squeezed against each other, hot sweat flowed freely, and the air was abnormally turbid. Li Yun and Xianxia tried their best to hold their breaths, but there was still a pungent smell entering their nostrils. As Li Yun and Xianxia's image was too outstanding, many people were sizing them up. Some people with ulterior motives also started to walk over, and the space they could move around became more and more crowded. "Scram!" Jiang Xianxia suddenly shouted. A long-haired man standing in front of Jiang Xianxia glared at her angrily and scolded, "Wretched woman, who are you asking to scram? Do you think that this subway belongs to you? Others can only get on if you allow them to? Others can't get on if you don't allow them to? You know what you have done. Do you believe that I will cripple your dirty hands if you dare to touch me again?" When had Jiang Xianxia ever suffered such grievances? Not only was she taken advantage of, but she was also insulted and disgusted. Her anger surged. "I groped you? I think you are the one who touched me, right? I can tell from the way you dress that you are a mistress of some man. I can tell that you are a green TB asterisk teeth. I know women like you the best. You're debauched to the bone, but your heart is very empty. You pounce on handsome men when you see them. Don't lean on me if you are so capable. Tell me what you said one more time, will you? When did I look at you? I feel disgusted when I see you. Do you like to hear it? If you like it, you can repeat it 100 times. I can tell that you are." Bam! Jiang Xianxia kneed the crew cut. The crew cut howled and fell to the ground with his hands on his stomach. Wow! Seeing that Jiang Xianxia had kicked him without saying a word, the people around him immediately dispersed. The perverts who were dilly-dallying on Jiang Xianxia's body were gone. The suffocating and narrow space had increased by a few times. Even the air they breathed felt much fresher. "Help, I am going to die. Call the police. I'm going to die. The long-haired man rolled on the ground and shouted. Idiot. Xianxia scolded him with a look of disdain. Beating up a sex maniac wasn't a big deal to her. Xianxia guarded Shifeng by Li Yun's side and avoided the perverts who dared to touch his big boss. However, he had to take good care of his boss's daughter. He stared coldly at the long-haired man who was lying on the ground and took out his phone to make a call. They were only 3 stops away from the Longtu building. They reached their destination very quickly. When they alighted, the long-haired man tried to stop them but was pushed to the ground by Shifeng. When the long-haired man tried to get up again, 2 police officers ran over and caught him. Shifeng looked at the 2 police officers and said, I don't have much time to explain. You can check the surveillance footage in the car and you will know the situation. This is my name card, you can contact me anytime. After he finished speaking, he quickly chased after Li Yun and Xianxia, who were already in front of him. The long-haired man was dumbfounded. He looked at the 2 police officers and smiled. Police officers, who did I offend? How would I know who you offended? The middle-aged police officer said angrily, I only know that Bureau Chief Wang from the municipal police station called Bureau Chief Lin and asked us to come over to handle a molestation case. Police officers, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't stand properly and touched the woman's breasts. I didn't do it on purpose. You know that such things can't be avoided in a car. Li Yun's phone rang again after they got out of the subway station. Li Yun took a look at the caller ID and answered the call immediately. She smiled and said, Jiangling, what's the matter? Fourth aunt, have you arrived? I was stuck on the road just now. They said that there was a series of collisions in front. I had no choice but to leave the car and take the subway here. I will reach Longtu building in a few minutes. Li Yun explained, have you received the military order? I was stuck on the road. Jiang Junling said, you can start first, don't wait for me. Okay, I will sign with them first. Li Yun smiled and said, Jiangling, you don't have to rush. It won't delay anything. Thank you, fourth aunt, Jiang Junling said. After hanging up the phone, Li Yun said to Xianxia, fortunately we arrived in time. I wanted Jiang Junling to come forward and sign on our behalf. I didn't expect him to be stuck on the road too. Someone from the Jiang family has to step forward for this signing ceremony. So annoying. Xianxia said unhappily, those people are so uncultured. All right. Li Yun comforted her and said, the world is so big and full of strange things. There are good people and bad people. This is a matter of course. You usually have a luxurious car and a clean foot. You have been away from society for too long. To many people, what you encountered today is not a problem at all. They crossed the pedestrian bridge and walked towards the majestic Longtu building. Just as they reached the entrance, they saw a group of workers in Longtu uniforms gathering in their direction. The security guards of Longtu building were running out and getting ready to chase these people out. However, these workers were very cunning. They chased after them and came back again when they stopped. Both parties were playing hide-and-seek. The reporters who were waiting for the signing ceremony to begin in the hall got the news and came out to film this scene. Li Yun's heart skipped a beat. She finally realized that perhaps all natural disasters were man-made disasters. From the inexplicable series of collisions to the workers gathering to create trouble, it was all secretly planned by someone. Someone didn't want the 3 parties to cooperate and wanted to smear layers of dog *T on their faces. Chapter 524. Sir, may I know why all of you are gathered here? The reporter randomly pulled an old man for an interview and pointed the camera at his wrinkled face. We want an explanation. The old man said with a lisp, we are all workers from the Jiahua Electronics Factory. Jiahua Electronics Factory? The reporter was obviously stunned. He smiled and said, Sir, this is the Longtu building. Did you get the wrong place? We didn't get the wrong place. We are looking for Longtu Corporation. They were the ones who bought over the Jiahua Electronics Factory and used a fake contract to buy out all of us old workers. Not only did they kick us out of the factory, they also cut off our medical insurance. We are old now and can't work anymore. Furthermore, we are sick. When we went to the Jiahua Electronics Factory, the director said that he had nothing to do with this matter and that Longtu Corporation was responsible for taking care of us. Only then did we realize that Longtu Corporation had tricked us. How are we going to survive? Sir, Did you bring the buyout contract from before? We brought it all. The old man took out a yellowed paper bag from his pocket. The reporter reached out to take it, but the old man quickly held it in his arms and said, "Don't tell me you are in cahoots with them? I heard that there are many bad people among the reporters. Sir, we are not bad people. If what you said is true, we will find a way to seek justice for you. Sir, we will not accept your contract. You can spread it out and let our cameraman take a shot of the contract." In this way, Li Yun's face was pale and her eyes were filled with anger as she walked toward the Longtu building. After Xianxia took a look at the contract from another worker, she quickly caught up with her mother, Li Yun, and said, "The Jiang family's acquisition of the Jiahua electronics factory back then was indeed dishonest. However, one party was willing to take the hit and the other party was willing to take the hit. Since they had signed the contract, they should have followed the contract. However, someone exposed them at this crucial point. It was obvious that they were trying to embarrass us." Fang Yan. Li Yun gritted her teeth and shouted this name. In Huaqing, only Fang Yan dared to go against them. Only he had the ability to trample on the faces of the Jiang clan and the Lan clan so ruthlessly under his feet. With Du Qing's help, Fang Yan was like a tiger that had grown wings. It could really be him. Jiang Xianxia chuckled and said, "This guy never seems to be willing to lose out." After Jiang Junling plotted against them, he immediately gave us a show of strength. His power in Flower City is truly shocking. A single command is enough to make it difficult for us to move an inch. Hearing her daughter's words, Li Yun's heart sank even faster. He didn't go directly to the conference room where the signing ceremony would be held. Instead, he took the elevator to Jiang Zhuliu's office. Jiang Zhuliu came out and said with a serious expression, "Mom, did you see everything?" "Yes," Li Yun said expressionlessly. "Zhuliu, what do you plan to do?" "I've already asked the group's legal department to negotiate with them." Jiang Zhuliu invited the three of them to his office to rest. After the secretary served tea and left, Jiang Zhuliu said, "But for them to jump out at this time, they're definitely not here with good intentions. I'm afraid that they will demand an exorbitant price." "We were stuck in traffic on the way here," Li Yun said. "They said that there was a series of car collisions ahead, and because they were afraid of delays, they had to take the subway to rush over. The military order is still stuck on the road and won't be here for a while. They asked us to start first and not wait for him." Jiang Zhuliu's expression darkened and he said fiercely, "The Lan clan called just now. They said that they were also stuck on the road. I'm afraid that they won't be here for a while. Fang Yan has started to retaliate. Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Damn Du Qing." "Yes," Li Yun said, "Fang Yan has started to retaliate. Only he has such capabilities and guts." Jiang Zhuliu sneered and said, "It's hard for him to stop the three of us from joining forces, so he can only use such underhanded methods to obstruct us and create some difficulties for us, to embarrass himself." "Is this just some underhanded methods?" Jiang Xianxia said with a cold expression. "We were stuck in the middle of the traffic and we had no choice but to abandon the car and take the subway. We were molested on the subway and even called the police for help. Just as we walked to the entrance of Longtu building, we saw the workers protesting against Longtu's previous overbearing contract, and the reporters were fighting to report on it. If this matter isn't handled well, Longtu Group's reputation will be tarnished. If we want to settle this matter properly, we have to satisfy those workers' exorbitant demands. If we satisfy them, what about the other workers?" Today, dozens of workers gathered at the entrance of Longtu building to protest. If your legal department agrees to their harsh conditions today, there will be thousands of people gathering at the entrance of Longtu building to protest tomorrow. Is this trouble just a small trouble to you? To encounter so many troublesome matters so early in the morning, I'm afraid that this collaboration, Xianxia. Li Yun shouted sternly and interrupted what Jiang Xianxia was about to say. She said, "Since it has already happened, think about how to settle it. What's the use of blaming each other?" Jiang Xianxia knew that her mother didn't want to see a dispute between her and Jiang Zhuliu, so she turned her face away unhappily. Jiang Zhuliu walked quickly to Jiang Xianxia and asked with a concerned look, "Molested on the subway? What exactly happened? Where is the person who molested you? I want him to suffer a fate worse than death." Li Yun took a look at Jiang Zhuliu and said, "All right, Zhuliu, the matter has already passed. We have already called the police and the police will punish him. What we need to do now is to settle the matter that happened right under our noses. Jiang Zhulu looked at Jiang Shangxin with a pitiful gaze, then turned around and said to Li Yun, I will call the Lan family again. No matter what, the signing ceremony must be held as per normal. Li Yun raised her wrist and looked at her watch. She said, the previously confirmed time has already passed. Let's see when they will be able to rush over. Let's choose another time. Jiang Zhulu immediately called the Lan family's representative. Lan Ling informed him that they would need another half an hour to rush over, and he apologized repeatedly over the phone. Jiang Zhulu comforted Lan Ling, hung up the phone and said to Li Yun, let's sign at 11:30. We are fine with it. Li Yun frowned and said, get the assistant to give each of the reporters a red packet. Make it bigger and say more nice things. Also, get someone to call the media leaders who came today and ask them not to report negative news about Long2 Group. Report more positive news. I understand. Jiang Zhulu nodded and said, Fang Yan knew about the Long2 Group's misfortune, and he knew that this was Du Qing's doing. As a veteran local tyrant in Huaqing, it was very easy for him to make Jiang Junling and the rest suffer. It was too easy to cause a traffic jam. Once they knew the exact time of the signing ceremony, they could get their underlings to find out the route that the important figures of the Lan family would be driving on, and then create some trouble at key locations. These little tricks couldn't hurt anyone, but they were enough to disgust people. Furthermore, it made it hard for people to vent their anger in anger. Everyone would feel very uncomfortable if such an incident happened on such a joyous day. The real killer move was still the trouble caused by the employees of Jiahua Electronics Factory. No matter how Jiang Zhulu and the rest solved this problem, they would only be losers. If they compensated those troublemakers, what kind of compensation would be given to the other factories that were acquired and the existing workers? One had to know that Long2 had set up quite a number of contract traps for its expansion in the past few years. Those workers couldn't see it themselves, but Fang Yan and Du Qing didn't mind stepping up to be angels who took pleasure in helping others. If they refused to compensate those troublemakers, the overwhelming news from the media would make them infamous. The sharpest tool to kill wasn't the knife, but the brain. Of course, most people couldn't use the second tool well. When Fang Yan drove back, he kept feeling that a car was following him. He turned east and the car followed him. He turned west and the car followed him. Fang Yan drove towards the Pearl River area. After parking the car by the Pearl River, he went straight to a tea house by the river. Shui Wuxia Tea House. Fang Yan chose a table near the window and ordered a pot of Dongting Biluakun tea. Not long after, a beautiful woman walked over, pulled out a chair and sat opposite Fang Yan. The woman looked around and said with infinite grievance, "Aren't you supposed to treat me to a meal? I'm hungry, I can't drink tea. I promised someone that I would go back for a meal." Fang Yan said, "So I can only treat you to tea." "Bu Chaoga?" The woman chuckled. "I heard that you're living a comfortable life in Huaqing? You're even playing the game of keeping a mistress?" Fang Yan held the teacup and drank the tea, saying, "My life is all right. If you think I'm a mistress, I'm indeed being kept in a mistress house." The woman giggled, her delicate red lips exuding a fatal charm. She played with her slightly curly hair with one finger, looked at Fang Yan sitting opposite her and said, "You really don't know your place. What kind of mistress are you? Lu Chaoga is the real mistress. You and Lu Chaoga flirting in Huaqing, aren't you afraid that the Yi girl will be jealous?" Fang Yan thought about it, then said, "She won't be jealous." "Liar." The woman sneered. "In this world there are only women who don't love you. Which woman won't be jealous?" Chapter 525. The girl's words weren't unreasonable. In this world there were only women who didn't love you. How could there be a woman who wouldn't be jealous? If a woman loved you wholeheartedly, then she would want your body to be hers, your heart to be hers, your house to be hers, your car to be hers, the diamond ring to be yours, and your bank card to be hers. Based on Fang Yan's understanding of Yi Ro, although she always looked like a calm and indifferent fairy, she was actually a little petty deep down. Not only was she brutal and violent, she also liked to hold grudges. Most importantly, she would definitely take revenge. If she knew that he was living with Lu Chaoga, she would definitely be secretly angry. When the anger accumulated to a certain extent, it would turn into a powerful bomb and explode. Fang Huohuo would be beaten to death by her again. Moreover, Fang Yan knew that she definitely knew that he was living with Lu Chaoga, who asked him to have too many spies around him. Sometimes Fang Yan would also reflect, Yi Ro had so many flaws, why did he agree to be her boyfriend? Even if she once hugged his thigh and begged him to be her boyfriend, he shouldn't have been soft-hearted and agreed. One's life was important and he couldn't be careless. It wasn't like he didn't understand this principle. Too soft-hearted. This was Fang Yan's evaluation of himself. Fang Yan looked at the girl sitting opposite him gloomily and said, "Why did you come to Huaqing again?" "Came to see you." The girl said. "I was afraid that you weren't doing well, so I came to see, but after following you secretly for 2 days, I realized that you were doing better than I imagined. Since you see that I'm doing well, you should quickly go back." Fang Yan said, "Huaqing is in troubled times, don't get involved." "What? Is someone bullying you again?" The girl raised her eyebrows. Obviously she didn't like to hear people bullying Fang Yan. No. Fang Yan shook his head. "I'm bullying someone." "That's great." The woman almost jumped with joy. "Who is so lucky to be bullied by you?" "I like to bully people the most." "Fang Yan, let me help you bully people?" Seeing Fang Yan smiling bitterly without saying anything, the girl said with a displeased expression, "So stingy. It was rare to find a fun game. Wouldn't it be better for everyone to play together? I'm bored to death." Fang Yan looked at the girl's beautiful face with a serious expression and said softly, "For you, everything is just a game?" The girl's face darkened. She held the teacup and lowered her head to drink. When she raised her head again, her playful and joyful expression returned. She said, "Fang Yan, are you still blaming me? Blame me for not choosing you back then? Are you blaming me for not accepting your pursuit?" Fang Yan was extremely angry and said, "Do you know that there is a saying, young and ignorant? Who didn't do a few stupid things when they were young? They thought that there were treasures in the ditch, that there was a dragon palace in the back mountain, that they jumped down from the top of a 3-story building with an umbrella, kicked their legs and said that they knew Qigong. When they saw a woman with big breasts, they thought it was his first love, Fang Yan." The girl was so angry that the teacup in her hand creaked. It was as if the teacup made of porcelain could not bear the weight and could break at any time. Fang Yan drank his tea calmly, not caring about the girl's angry attitude at all. The girl was angry for a while, put the teacup in her hand on the table, crossed her fingers and looked at Fang Yan with a smile. She said, "Yi Ru's breasts are not as big as mine, right?" Puff. Fang Yan spat out the tea in his mouth and looked for a tissue to wipe his mouth in a panic. The girl looked at Fang Yan's embarrassment and giggled as if she had gotten her revenge. Fang Yan wiped the water stains on the table and the corners of his mouth with a tissue. He stared at the girl angrily and said, "And Xiao, can you be serious? We are talking about our first love." And Xiao was the name of Phoenix. Fang Yan liked to call her by this name when he was angry. Of course, most people called her Phoenix Girl. "You were the one who didn't get serious first." The girl raised her nose slightly and said disdainfully, "You were the one who said that when he saw a woman with big breasts, he thought it was his first love. But you still can't compare with Yi Ruru." "Why can't I compare with her?" The girl asked back, "Isn't Yi Ruru a woman? Is she as big as my breasts?" "Fang Yan, how did you fall in love with Yi Ruru? Didn't you hate her the most in the past?" The girl looked at Fang Yan sitting across from her and said, "Do you still remember? Every time she beat you black and blue, she would tear off your arm and break your leg bones. Every time you fought with her, you would go to me to treat and bandage your wounds. You said you had never seen such a violent woman. You said she was the ugliest woman in the world. You also said that such a woman would never be able to get married. You said that even if you liked a pig, you wouldn't like Yi Ruru. Why don't you like a pig?" Fang Yan's expression was a little embarrassed. He said with a red face, "That was in the past. After I got to know her more, I realized that Yi Ruru was actually a good person. Although she was very violent, she was kind at heart. Although she always beats me black and blue, that's because I provoked her first. She tore off my arm and broke my leg bones. That was also to encourage me to make progress, hoping that I could achieve something in martial arts. You men," the girl's smile was very bitter. She said, "You are all born liars." Fang Yan looked at the girl and said, "I didn't lie to you. When I liked you, I really liked you. How could he not really like her?" He tried to find reasons to meet her, racked his brains to please her, and his heart was bleeding when he saw her dating other boys. He thought about her when he ate, thought about her when he slept. The first thing he did when he opened his eyes was to ask her if she had a good sleep last night. The last thing he did before going to bed was to ask her to sleep early and not to stay up late. At that time he liked her without any distractions. At that time she was the sky in the whole world. When you don't like me, you really don't like me anymore, right? The girl asked. Fang Yan was silent. After a while he looked at the girl and said with a smile, "You and Bai Xiu, aren't you good?" "Fang Yan, do you like Bai Xiu?" the girl asked. "Oh." Fang Yan said straightforwardly, "Who would like their rival in love?" The girl smiled charmingly. "You're such a straightforward fellow. You wouldn't believe me even if I said I liked him," Fang Yan said with a smile. "Bai Xiu is more handsome than you, more knowledgeable than you, and better at kung fu than you. That's why you don't like him, right? Yi Gentle is prettier than you, more elegant than you, and better at kung fu than you. That's why you said her breasts aren't as big as yours, right?" Fang Yan and Xiao, the two glared at each other fiercely, neither willing to admit defeat. After a while Fang Yan moved his gaze away first and said, "You still haven't answered me. Why did you come to Flower City at this time?" "I already answered you. I thought your life in Flower City was miserable, so I came to see you. I didn't expect you to hide a mistress and live a better life than I imagined." "Humph, I'll tell Yi Gentle when I get back. Do you think she'll believe you?" "Of course she won't believe me," the phoenix said with a proud expression, "but she'll definitely bear a grudge against me. She's already known. It's not scary for a woman to be smart, but it's scary for a woman to play dumb. It's one thing for her to know, but if I say it in front of her, 'Why are you doing this to me?' 'Because I hate you.'" The two each had their own thoughts as they sipped their tea. Their gazes were leisurely cast on the surface of the Pearl River. The breeze on the river was cool, but both of them felt a bit gloomy. It was as if something wanted to break out of their bodies, but couldn't break through their skin and flesh. It was extremely uncomfortable. On the river there were cruises full of tourists as well as single-person ferries. They were the scenery for the customers, and the tea houses were also the scenery for them. At this time Fang Yan's gaze met with a man's. It was a very strange pair of eyes. They were very gentle, but they contained a powerful force. Coming into contact with them was like being punched in the eye socket. His eyes were sore and swollen, and tears flowed down his face. Unleashing one's martial prowess was a madman. Fang Yan didn't like this feeling, so he looked for that pair of eyes again. He quickly found his target. It was a passenger on a canoe. The man wasn't tall and he was slightly chubby. His hair was very short, so short that it was next to his scalp. He was wearing a set of brown sportswear, and he looked extremely inconspicuous at first glance. However, Fang Yan just happened to know that this person had the aura of a dragon and the aura of a tiger. He was extremely aggressive. Fang Yan shifted his gaze again, which surprised the man. His eyes were locked on Fang Yan, and he once again swept over with his dignity. To his surprise, the aura of a murderous aura was like a stone sinking into the sea, and it didn't cause any waves. The young man sitting in the tea house was still looking at him calmly with a faint smile on his face, as if he was laughing at his useless efforts. Just as he was about to test it again, his eyes suddenly felt as if they were being pricked by a sharp needle. He covered his eyes with both hands and his body retreated repeatedly. The man knew that he had been sneak attacked by the young man. He had just used a visual attack on the other party, and the other party had also used a visual attack on him. Visual attack. That young man actually knew how to use a visual attack. The man didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed. After rubbing his eyes, he once again walked to the edge of the canoe, and used the body freezing technique to stop the boat from moving on the river. He directly shouted towards the tea house, "The lady in red on the second floor, would you accompany me on the boat to enjoy the scenery?" Phoenix had long since discovered the flirtatious glances between Fang Yan and the strange man on the canoe. Hearing him shout towards her, and the fact that she was the only lady on the second floor, and she just so happened to be wearing a red dress, she couldn't help but become angry. In a tender voice she scolded, "Who are you talking to if I poke out your dog eyes?" Chapter 526. With you, of course. Seeing Phoenix's anger, the man didn't seem to mind at all and continued to boast shamelessly. "The only person who can catch my eye on both sides of the Pearl River is you. Would you be willing to give me face and take a boat to the west to see the scenery on both sides of the river?" "I'm not interested in watching the scenery with you," Phoenix said with an unfriendly expression. This was the first time she was being teased in public. In the past it was always her who teased others like Fang Yan. "Miss, you're not giving me any face," the strange man on the boat laughed and said. The strange man on the boat chuckled and said, "Miss, why don't you discuss it with the pretty boy opposite you? Maybe he'll agree to my request. Let your mother accompany you," Phoenix cursed. As she spoke, she had already thrown the teacup in her hand. Whoosh! The teacup jumped out of the window, pierced through the air, and smashed towards the man's face with a whistling sound. As fast as a meteor, it arrived in the blink of an eye. Pop! The man grabbed with one hand and the teacup landed in his palm. He drank the remaining tea in the cup in one gulp, greedily kissed the rim of the cup and loudly praised, "Good tea, fragrant tea. Good tea, fragrant tea." "You pervert." Phoenix grabbed the teapot and was about to throw it at the man again. "The tea has been drunk, the teacup is returned." The man flicked his finger and the teacup flew back at an even faster speed. Pop! Phoenix slapped the teacup away with her palm. Before it could reach her face, she had already used her internal energy to slap it away. Fush! The teacup lost its momentum and fell into the Pearl River in front of her. She wouldn't touch something that had been used by others, and the man had even kissed the rim of the teacup, which made her feel even more disgusted. The man laughed and said, "Miss, you're so irritable. I'm afraid your inner fire is rising, and your yin and yang are not in harmony. I have a side that can cure you. Would you like to try?" This time not only was Phoenix's expression embarrassed, but even Fang Yan was furious. He casually threw the teacup in his hand over. The teacup was filled with tea, and it spun rapidly like a top as it flew towards the man's face. "I'm not interested in a man's teacup." As the man spoke, he reached out to slap the teacup that Fang Yan had thrown at him away. But when the strength of his palm came into contact with the rotating teacup, the teacup suddenly exploded. The shards of the teacup shattered and shrouded the man's body. The tea in the teacup splashed everywhere, splashing all over the man's face and body. The man stood there in a daze for a long time, then burst out laughing. Beautiful. It was simply too beautiful. Whirlwind explosion. One whirlwind, one world. It is difficult for external forces to fuse, and it is difficult for external objects to enter. Touching it would break the balance and cause one's body to explode. I didn't expect to see an expert who can use whirlwind explosion on the Pearl River, the man shouted loudly. He shouted to Fang Yan in the tea house, "Brother, what's your name?" He had just called Fang Yan a gigolo, but now he was calling him brother in the blink of an eye. This man's moral integrity, it was so insignificant that it could be ignored. Fang Yan replied in a deep voice, "Don't call me brother." He was not willing to be brothers with others easily. "Fang Yan? Are you brother Fang Yan from Swallow Doc's Fang Tai Chi?" Fang Yan's eyes turned cold and he said, "That's me." "No wonder." The man praised and said, "It's said that Fang Tai Chi has a successor and is the rising star of the Tai Chi branch. Seeing you today, it really lives up to its reputation. Who are you?" Fang Yan asked loudly. Fang Yan had no impression of this man at all, but the man clearly knew his identity. This was a very bad feeling, and it also made him feel insecure, as if he was being coveted. "Ho Zhendong," the man replied loudly, "my friends who have met me call me martial arts fanatic." Martial arts fanatic? Fang Yan was stunned. This ordinary-looking middle-aged man with a wretched manner was martial arts fanatic, one of Wuxia's 7 fanatics? Fang Yan felt as if his faith had collapsed. Music fanatic who could make his Tai Chi heart resonate strongly and cause his clothes to explode, was a godlike character that he could never forget. Why did martial arts fanatic, who was as famous as music fanatic, look like a tragic tram fanatic? How could such a person be chosen as one of Wuxia's 7 fanatics? Did someone in the organizing committee accept a red packet from him? Martial arts fanatic? Phoenix was also a member of the pugilistic world. Perhaps she did not know the name Ho Zhendong, but the title of martial arts fanatic was so impressive that very few people did not know it. Martial arts fanatic of Wuxia's 7 fanatics? Why is he in Huaqing? Why is he like this? As expected, Phoenix and Fang Yan felt the same way. How could such a person be called martial arts fanatic? Was there not a single member of the 7 Fanatics Appearance Association? In their minds, a martial arts fanatic should have a jade-like face, shoulder-length hair, serious in speech and manner, and have the demeanor of an immortal. It's fine when he doesn't move, but when he does, the earth will shake. Fang Yan also felt like the earth was shaking, but it was because of the martial arts fanatic's image and the way he teased the girl just now. He might be a fake, Fang Yan whispered. Fang Yan's voice was very soft, but the martial arts fanatic heard it. Ho Zhendong shouted, "Ignorant brat who dares to fake the title of martial arts fanatic. Aren't you afraid that I'll fight him to the death?" Senior martial arts fanatic is right, Fang Yan shouted. "It's my great honor to meet Senior today. If there's a chance in the future I'll invite Senior for tea again." Fang Yan grabbed Phoenix's arm and said in a low voice, "Let's go." Saying so, the two of them prepared to slip out of the tea house. "Brat, don't go," the martial arts fanatic shouted. "An invitation is not as good as a chance encounter. Since we're meeting at the edge of the Pearl River, how could we not have a good fight? Stay, let's spar." "Senior, unfortunately my wife is giving birth in the hospital today." While speaking, Fang Yan had already left his chair and ran towards the stairs. "Fang Yan, brat, don't go." The martial arts fanatic was furious, shouting Fang Yan's name, wanting him to stay. How could Fang Yan dare to stay? He only wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. The martial arts fanatic was famous mainly because of his obsession with martial arts. It's said that the martial arts fanatic became famous at a young age, then began to travel everywhere to challenge others. As long as he takes a fancy to an opponent, he'll find a way to make them fight. In order to stimulate his opponent's fighting spirit, he'll even use some very dishonorable methods. For example, when he teased the phoenix just now, he must have thought that the phoenix was Fang Yan's girlfriend, so he directly set his target on the phoenix. Fang Yan, the opponent that he had his eyes on, would naturally be enraged for the sake of his beauty and jump out to fight with him for 300 rounds. Moreover, he'll be full of anger, so he'll definitely not show mercy. Unexpectedly, before Fang Yan could make a move, Phoenix already couldn't help but throw a cup at him. The martial arts fanatic loved to fight all his life, and those who fight are sure to win. Out of over 1,000 challengers, he only lost once. He only lost to the old drunkard Mo Qingdi at his peak. Even his teacher who taught him was defeated after he left for 10 years, and has since gone into seclusion. Some said that he was angered to death by his disciple, while others said that he was painstakingly researching new moves to defeat his disciple. But until now he still hasn't succeeded. There are many rumors, but no one knows which one is the real situation. What Fang Yan didn't expect was that he just came to the riverside to drink a cup of tea, meet a wretched uncle, and then run into one of the legendary 7 addicts of Wuxia, the martial addict. As long as it's an opponent that the martial addict takes a fancy to, he won't be able to avoid him. He'll always follow behind you and make all kinds of provocative moves. Now Fang Yan is running into such a person. Just as Fang Yan ran to the stairs, he heard a whistling sound behind him. Fang Yan didn't even turn his head and struck out with his palm. Crack! With a crisp sound, the wooden board was smashed into pieces by Fang Yan. The martial addict actually kicked out a wooden board, using it as a weapon to stop Fang Yan from leaving. At the same time, he kicked another 2 boards into the water, and with a leap he stepped onto the wooden board. Pa pa pa, his toes touched the floating board and he crossed the river, leaping up to the 2nd floor of the tea house. His movements were rapid and his body was like a dragonfly skimming the water. At the same time that Fang Yan smashed the board, he had already rushed to where Fang Yan was sitting, and looked at Fang Yan mockingly, saying, "Little friend Fang Yan, are you really in such a hurry to leave?" Fang Yan and Phoenix had to stop. Fang Yan turned to look at the martial addict and said, "Senior Ho, why are you in such a hurry to go upstairs?" "Fight with me," the martial addict said. "I want you to fight with me. Since you know who I am, you should know that this is the only thing I want." "No problem," Fang Yan readily agreed. "Really?" The martial addict was overjoyed. "When and where?" 10 years from now at the Shui Wuxia tea house. I'll see you there," Fang Yan said heroically. "A gentleman's promise is worth 1,000 gold. How could I lie to you about such a serious matter?" "Where is Shui Wuxia?" the martial addict asked. Fang Yan looked at the martial addict in shock. Shouldn't his focus be on why the duel is 10 years from now? The martial addict finally thought of this and angrily said, "Ignorant brat, you've wronged me again. Why is it 10 years from now?" "I can't beat you right now," Fang Yan sincerely said. "You are the famous 7 addicts of Wuxia. I don't think I'm a match for you at all." The martial addict smirked and said, "It's just a lowly name not worth mentioning. Don't take it to heart. A person's name is like a tree's shadow. Senior martial addict is famous throughout Wuxia. The number of combatants that have lost to you is uncountable. Fang Yan is still young. How could he be a match for Mr. Martial Addict? Not only am I not a match for you, I don't even have the qualifications to fight against you. Fang Yan looked at the martial addict with a face full of respect, as if flattery was free of charge. However, a soldier who doesn't want to be a general is not a good soldier, and a warrior who doesn't want to defeat the martial addict is not a good warrior. Mr. Martial Addict, although you are very powerful, although I respect and admire you 10 years from now, right here, right now, I, Fang Yan, will challenge you again. After saying that, Fang Yan angrily turned around. An impassioned expression that said he would take revenge one day. Chapter 527. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. Let's meet again in 10 years. When Fang Yan turned to leave, he didn't forget to give Phoenix a reminder with his eyes. Hurry up, don't let this idiot turn around. Phoenix was also a clever person and she had worked together with Fang Yan for many years, so she naturally understood what he meant. She stared at the martial addict with disdain and said, "The river flows east for 30 years and the river flows west for 30 years. Don't bully the young for being poor. 10 years later, Fang Yan will definitely get revenge here and defeat the martial addict." What a good young man. The martial addict thought in his heart. He was almost moved by this young man. Although he clearly knew his own strength and clearly recognized the gap between them, he didn't give up nor was he depressed. He had a dream in his heart and was motivated to fight back. 10 years later, at this time and place, he would challenge himself again. Wait, why was it still 10 years later? Bastard. The martial addict was so angry that he slapped the wooden table, and the teacup on the table flew towards Fang Yan's back. The teacup moved in a straight line, generous, neutral and peaceful, just like the most ordinary teacup containing the most ordinary tea. The strange thing was that there was no tea waiter bringing the teacup in the middle. The teacup was silent, but it contained a great deal of lethality. Fang Yan had fought with countless strange people, and he was very clear that the simpler a move was, the more complicated the truth was. If you couldn't understand the truth behind it, you couldn't take these moves. Those extremely gaudy moves, on the other hand, didn't have that much lethality. Because those complicated moves were a waste of chi and also a waste of strength. For these top experts, strength was like eating and not a single grain of rice could be left. This move was similar to the spinning explosion that Fang Yan had just used. It perfectly combined chi and strength and then transformed it into a more aggressive move. The difference was that the cup that Fang Yan threw needed to rotate to maintain the balance of chi and strength, and maintain an independent world. It was not disturbed by the attack of external forces or objects. But the cup that the martial addict threw with his palm moved in a straight line, and achieved the balance of chi and strength without the need to rotate. It was obvious that this was a level higher than Fang Yan's. Skyline. One line as the heavens, the Tao of nature. Fang Yan took a step forward with his right foot, his upper body swaying non-stop, as if he was drunk and unable to stand steadily. His upper body ran 11 circles in an instant before he managed to avoid the teacup's attack. Ka! The teacup smashed into the wall, but the tea in the teacup seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Not a single drop spilled out. In fact, when the martial addict slammed his palm on the table, the tea in the teacup had already been evaporated by his majestic and turbulent chi. What was flying in the air was just an empty teacup. Beautiful. Nice hiding. The martial addict burst into laughter and said, "How many years has it been? It's rare to see such an eye-catching young opponent." Of his previous opponents, some were too old and some were too young. The old man's fists were loose and his chi was weak. He couldn't stand a prolonged battle. The young punches were short of breath, and it was difficult for them to form any form of power. It's really boring. Little brother Fang Yan, what was the name of the move you used just now? Was it Drunken Crane Riding the Wind? This was the Drunken Crane Riding the Wind created by Azure Dragon Imo Chingdi after he was crippled. The martial fanatic was also a weirdo. When he was annoyed or angry, he would open his mouth and call you ignorant kid, or pretty boy. However, when you performed a martial art move that made his eyes light up, he would immediately change the way he addressed you as brother. It was Drunken Crane Riding the Wind. Fang Yan answered truthfully. What a heaven-sent genius. He really is a genius. The martial addict said with a face full of regret, Wuxia, Azure Dragon Emochingdi, how glorious and dazzling he was back then. I painstakingly chased after him for 3 months and 17 days and finally got the chance to fight him by the Qingming Lake. After exchanging 3 punches, I used my spear. The first spear. He only used 1 spear and broke 29 strands of my hair. I saved that strand of hair and carefully counted it. The martial addict fondled the green skin on his head with nostalgia and said, I used to be like Emochingdi, I also had long hair. If a martial artist doesn't have long hair, what kind of heroic spirit is there? Do you know why I cut my hair so short now? It's because I was worried that I would meet an expert like Emochingdi again and have my hair cut off again. What a pity, the Azure Dragon met the Divine Dragon. In the battle between the 2 dragons, the Azure Dragon's tendons were destroyed and his cultivation was crippled. Even the heavens are jealous of geniuses. All these years I've challenged people everywhere and trained hard, all for the sake of one day fighting with the Azure Dragon again and erasing the shame of losing my hair. I'm afraid I won't have the chance to fight with the Azure Dragon, but I did meet the Azure Dragon's disciple. This can be considered a fortunate event. Fang Yan was so scared that he quickly explained, Senior martial addict, don't misunderstand. Me and the old drunkard. You see, I've always called him the old drunkard out of habit. I've never called him the Azure Dragon or Emochingdi before. The old drunkard isn't my master and I'm not his disciple. We're actually of the same generation. He's my grandfather's eldest disciple and I'm my grandfather's youngest disciple. We're brothers. If you don't believe me, you can go to the inner river and ask around to see if I'm lying to you. The martial addict laughed as he looked at Fang Yan, saying, You're such a slippery brat. If I wasn't careful, I would have fallen into your trap. You think I'll let you go just because you say you're not my disciple? I'm just a martial addict. It's not that I'm not clear-headed. Master and disciple or fellow apprentice, as long as you learn Emochingdi's drunken crane rides the wind, and coincidentally use his technique to break my one-line heaven, then we'll have a good fight. Fang Yan helplessly looked at the martial addict, asking, Can't we not fight? No, I'll admit defeat, okay? You can't either, the martial addict said. If every opponent I challenge admits defeat, would there still be any fights in life? Would there still be any joy in living? This guy's a bastard, Fang Yan secretly thought to himself. How good would it be to be safe and painless? Why must I fight to the death with others? If I beat someone to death or cripple them, wouldn't I feel guilty and guilty? If I'm beaten to death or crippled, or worse, I might even be beaten to disfigurement, wouldn't that be a death grudge? Wouldn't my children and grandchildren have to think of ways to avenge me? I really don't want to fight against Senior Martial Addict, and I know I'm no match for Senior Martial Addict. Fang Yan hesitantly said, How about I just stand here and let Senior Martial Addict beat me up? If I want to spar, it won't be one-sided violence. That would be equally tasteless. The martial addict was also a bit hesitant, thought for a bit, then said, How about this? I'll give you a question. If you can solve it, I'll let you go and we'll call it a day. Really? Fang Yan was secretly happy, then said, Don't give me a question from the 4 books and 5 classics, or the Book of Taoism. I'm not familiar with those. Of course not. The martial addict waved his hand and said, Martial artists naturally have to take a martial test. Who would do such a scholarly thing? The martial addict thought for a bit, then picked up a teacup from the table, picked up the teapot and poured water into the teacup. When the teacup was full, the martial addict put the teacup in his palm, lightly flicked his finger, and the teacup flew towards Fang Yan. This time it was flying in a whirling manner, or rather flying. Because its speed was very slow, it was as if there was a remote control controlling its flying rhythm. The teacup that was filled with tea stopped in front of Fang Yan, but it still maintained its spinning posture. Like a living creature. Phoenix was shocked. Standing next to Fang Yan, she whispered, This old monster's inner energy is unfathomable. This fairy flower offering move is very difficult to perform unless you've mastered Qigong. You must be careful. The martial addict was a fairy, the spinning teacup in front of Fang Yan's chest, and the tea in the teacup that didn't move or even ripple was the flower offered by the fairy. This flower wouldn't bring fragrance to people, but it could take away people's lives. Therefore, this flower was also called the Yama flower. Fang Yan was silent, as if he didn't hear what Phoenix said, his eyes staring at the spinning teacup in front of him. His legs trembled lightly and his body swayed once again. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, as if someone was constantly attacking him. It wasn't someone else attacking him, it was this Yama flower that kept attacking him. The Yama flower. was a barrier that the martial addict had poured a huge amount of strength into, and it was skillfully cast by him. It catered to the direction of the wind, fused with the airflow and guided by the power of nature and maintained its spinning state. Once the direction of the wind changed, the airflow increased or it was attacked by an external force, it would explode. The martial addict laughed as he looked at Fang Yen and said, "Fang Yen, you brat, as long as you can pick all of this flower and the water doesn't ripple, you'll pass today's question, shameless." Phoenix's temperament was extremely elegant and she cursed. When picking the flower, of course it would touch the cup, and when touching the cup, how could the water not ripple? "You're purposely making things difficult for us." "Ah," the martial addict laughed and said, "Little girl is right, I'm indeed making things difficult for you. Not only that." While the martial addict was still talking, his figure suddenly disappeared. A shadow flashed, and when he reappeared, he was already clutching Phoenix's neck. "In order to add a bit of entertainment, we should add a bit more stakes to this match. If he can't solve this question, I'll break your neck. Wouldn't that be a lot more fun?" Phoenix's face turned purplish red, reaching out to pull the martial addict's hand away. But the martial addict didn't budge at all. His fingers exerted a bit of force and all of her strength was drained away. "Fang Yen brat, don't disappoint me," the martial addict smirked and said, "Pick this Yama flower, or watch her die, dash." Chapter 528. Crazy because of love, crazy because of love. In order to force others to spar with him, he did not hesitate to kidnap a hostage, something that did not match his identity at all. This kind of martial fanatic, one of the 7 fanatics of Wuxia, was truly shameful. Phoenix's pretty little face turned purplish red. Her body was powerless and stopped struggling, as if she had resigned herself to being controlled by the martial fanatic to threaten Fang Yen. She came from a wealthy family. When had she ever suffered such grievances? When had she ever suffered such torment? Her eyes fiercely and angrily glared at the martial fanatic. She did not shrink back because her life was in the hands of others. Her mouth could not speak, but her eyes had already expressed all of her emotions. "Little girl, don't be angry with me." The martial fanatic looked at Phoenix with a smile and said, "I am doing this for the good of your little lover. If he can break this fairy flower offering, his cultivation will once again advance. At that time you will also benefit. At that time you will thank me, this old monster." Phoenix had just cursed the martial fanatic for being an old monster in a low voice. It turned out that the martial fanatic had already heard it. Now that he threw it back at Phoenix, Phoenix did not even have the chance to defend herself. Who told her to have her throat grabbed? The martial fanatic made his move and Phoenix was captured. All of these things happened in the time it takes for a normal person to blink their eyes. Fang Yen turned a deaf ear to everything around him, as if he did not notice that Phoenix was in danger. His body was still swaying back and forth, left and right in an irregular manner. The heart of Tai Chi naturally rotated and the Tai Chi domain fully unfolded. When the flower of the fairy flower offering appeared in front of Fang Yen as a more intuitive red line, Fang Yen could clearly see the picture of the rotating cup. The rotating cup was a straight line, but because the speed of the rotation was too fast, it looked as if those lines were in a completely still state. Not only was the cup rotating, but even the tea inside the cup, which did not look like there was a single ripple, was also rotating. The lines of the tea were dynamic and looked like undulating waves. Then here came the problem. The problem set by the martial addict was to make Fang Yen keep the water still while picking the Yama flower. The tea itself was rippling. When one's hand touched the edge of the cup or the body of the cup, it would only ripple more violently. How could one keep it still? It goes against the laws of physics. However, if he couldn't do that, how could he distinguish the difference between top-notch experts and ordinary people? If they couldn't go against the principles of martial arts, how could those martial gods and martial fanatics happily pretend to be pretentious? Fang Yen was now faced with such a difficult problem. Fang Yen stared at the spinning teacup without blinking, his fingers itching to move. He wanted to reach out and catch the teacup several times, but he resisted the urge to do so. He knew that the time was not right. If he dared to make a move, this ordinary teacup might turn into a powerful bomb. The pieces of the cup would turn into sharp daggers, and even the tea inside the cup would become indestructible steel nails. It was just like this spinning explosion that Fang Yen had just used on the martial addict. The difference was that this fairy flower was more lethal. Wonderful, Fang Yan had to praise the martial addict's skills in his heart. Just like the same writers, some of them wrote extravagant articles that made people salivate and smell fragrant, such as Love of Lotus, Epigraph of My Shack, and Peach Blossom Spring. Some of them wrote dull and boring articles such as The Genius Doctor and King of Fire. In the eyes of Fang Yan, the martial addict's fairy flower was equivalent to those famous works written by great masters. It was calm on the outside and dangerous on the inside, and it was well-rounded and well-balanced. The strength was balanced and the qi was used exquisitely. A little more would be too heavy and a little less would be too light. Compared with his spinning explosion, it was like the difference between The Genius Doctor and Peach Blossom Spring. Fang Yan was fascinated not only to solve the problem but also to appreciate the unique skill. Seeing Fang Yan's happy eyes and thoughtful expression, the martial addict's expression became strange. This kid is a little interesting. As time passed, the teacup in front of him was still spinning, and Fang Yan's body was still swaying like a drunken crane riding the wind. However, apart from a layer of fine sweat on his forehead, he did not make any move to solve the problem. Moreover, his eyes were getting brighter and brighter and his expression was getting more and more excited. It was as if the rotating cup in front of him was a peerless treasure cup, and he only needed to stretch out his hand to grab it. Phoenix was confused and there was a little annoyance in her heart. This idiot, I'm being kidnapped and you're still laughing like a fool like you've won the lottery. Is the first love not human? Does the first love not have human rights? The smile on the martial addict's face froze, and his gaze on Fang Yan became more and more serious. This guy is stronger than I thought. Dong dong dong, the sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. The red-robed waitress quickly walked up the stairs and asked, "Sir, did you break something?" She looked at the spinning teacup in front of Fang Yan in surprise, and forgot why she came upstairs. What's with that teacup? Is this a magic competition? Also, what's with that fatso strangling that beautiful girl's neck? As a dedicated tea house worker, shouldn't he call the police at this time? Phew, Fang Yan let out a deep breath. His body straightened, his feet stood still and his upper body stopped shaking. Crack. The teacup in front of him stopped spinning, fell to the ground and shattered. Fang Yan looked at the martial addict and asked, "Senior martial addict, my friend and I, can we leave now?" The martial addict let go of Phoenix's neck, but his eyes were still staring at the shattered teacup on the ground. It was as if the teacup had shattered into a flower again. Fang Yan pulled Phoenix in front of him and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Phoenix covered her neck, coughed a few times, then shook her head. "I'm fine." Her eyes looked at Fang Yan, then at the martial addict who had fallen into a trance, not understanding what happened between the two of them. "If there's nothing else," Fang Yan grabbed Phoenix's arm and said, "Let's go back." Phoenix nodded obediently, not even refusing Fang Yan's grip on her wrist. As the two of them walked down the stairs, Phoenix couldn't help but look back again. The martial addict was still in a trance state, as if something incomprehensible had happened in front of him. However, nothing strange had happened. After Fang Yan paid the bill at the front desk, the two of them walked out of the waterless tea house. Phoenix took a deep breath of the salty and humid air outside, feeling a lot more relaxed. In front of Fang Yan and the martial addict, she had always been under a lot of pressure. When the two of them were competing, it wasn't just a competition of strength, qi, but also a competition of presence. As the two of them continued to increase their presence, the pressure they exuded also became heavier and heavier. Even after spending so many years with Fang Yan, she still couldn't quite get used to it. Phoenix looked at Fang Yan and asked with a puzzled expression, "Did you pick the Yama flower?" "There's no such thing as a Yama flower, so why bother picking it?" Fang Yan asked with a smile. "What do you mean?" Phoenix was confused. "The cup of tea that the martial addict gave us just now, wasn't it a flower from a fairy?" "The martial addict is the martial addict, and the martial addict is not a fairy. Tea is tea, it can't grow a flower." Fang Yan shook his head with a smile. "We remove the complexity on the outside, remove the color on the surface, and only look at its most essential thing. It is a cup of water." "I don't understand," Phoenix said with some annoyance. Although she was proficient in martial arts, she was far from being comparable to young geniuses like Fang Yan and Bai Xiu. Compared to Yi Rou, she was far behind. This was also the reason why she found it hard to refute Fang Yan's claim that her martial arts were not as good as Yi Rou's. Fang Yen chuckled and said, "The mountain is the mountain, the water is the water, the mountain is not the mountain, the water is not the water." Most of the martial artists are stuck in this second stage, unable to move forward, and their lifetime achievements stop here. The martial addict has entered the realm where the mountain is still the mountain, the water is still the water, but because of the barrier of knowledge he complicates things, so he came up with such a seemingly difficult but actually very simple problem. How is it difficult and how is it simple? Phoenix was very anxious. These two guys were talking in silence, and as a bystander she was so anxious that her heart was itching. He set a trap in this question. The cup of water seems to be motionless, but in fact, it is flowing very fast and the whirlpool is turbulent. As you said, as long as the hand touches the cup, it will inevitably cause the water to ripple. Moreover, the cup and the water form a world of their own, and it will explode upon contact. It is impossible to reach out to pluck the yama flower and ensure that the water in the cup will not ripple, unless the heat in it is extracted and solidified into ice. But that is contrary to the test question. Because what the martial addict wants is water. If it solidifies into ice, it will fall into another trap set by him. But I didn't see the water in the cup move, Phoenix said. Right. Fang Yen snapped his fingers and said with a smile, "You didn't see the water ripple, and I also said that I didn't see the water in the cup move. Then does it prove that the water in the cup has not moved at all?" Phoenix's eyes lit up and said, "So even the martial addict can't prove that the water in the cup has always been flowing. If he wanted to prove this, he would have to remove the force and skill that he attached to the cup. That way, even if the water is shaking, it can be said that the martial addict himself caused the water to ripple." Fang Yen nodded and said, "Moreover, the cup continued to spin in front of me, not falling or breaking, and I used the drunken crane rides the wind to find its resonance frequency. The cup itself is already under my control, accepting my guidance. Since the fairy's flower is already in my hand, why would I need to pick it? So, you don't need to do anything and you have already completed this test question? Because this question has no solution, so I don't need to solve it at all," Fang Yen said with a smile. Chapter 529. Phoenix was very happy for Fang Yen and grinned for a while. Phoenix felt sad for herself. She found that they were not on the same wavelength at all. The martial addict casually throwing out a cup was the legendary flower offering from a fairy. Fang Yan's body swayed and he actually solved this century-old problem. Were these two fairies? What ulterior motives did they have in coming to the human world? The world of martial arts is really obscure and profound. Phoenix sighed. She had a feeling that she had more than enough but not enough strength. As the daughter of a wealthy family, she had already put in enough effort and had been gritting her teeth to keep up. But she just couldn't be like Fang Yen and Yi Ro, who could easily step into another small world. She was still bitterly searching in the outside world but couldn't find a way to enter. Fate was biased towards her, but how unfair was it to her? Fang Yen smiled and looked at Phoenix. "You can clearly rely on your face to make a living. Why must you rely on your talent? You can't even live a good life. You just have to learn how to stretch tendons and wield knives and sticks like us. Why bother?" "I'm willing." Phoenix raised her beautiful face and looked at Fang Yen with a smile on her face. She really liked what Fang Yen said when he said, "I can obviously rely on my face to make a living," and said, "Why do you care?" "I don't care." Fang Yen smiled and shook his head. He took out the key from his pocket and pressed the unlock button. "I'm going back. Goodbye." After that, he opened the door and prepared to leave. "Hey," Phoenix shouted from behind. Fang Yen turned to look at Phoenix and asked, "Is there anything else? I haven't had lunch yet. Are you really not going to treat me?" "I'm going back." Fang Yen said with a smile, "You should go back too. Watching doesn't suit you." Fang Yen waved his hand and slowly drove the BMW away. Looking at the gradually disappearing car, the smile on Phoenix's face froze. Her eyes were filled with sadness. She took out a pack of ladies' cigarettes from her pocket, took one out and put it in her mouth. She took a deep breath into her lungs and then gently exhaled. Not only did he not feel relaxed, but his heart felt even heavier. It was as if there was something pressing on his chest. "It would be great if it could be like smoking," the Phoenix said faintly. She did not leave. Instead, she turned around and returned to the tea house. Phoenix walked to the second floor again. The martial addict was still squatting in the same place, looking at the broken pieces of the teacup on the ground. The waitress in red looked at him with a puzzled expression. She missed the fact that he was a madman, but she felt that his madness was not too obvious. Phoenix patted the waitress on the shoulder, indicating that there was no need for her to stay. After the waiter left, Phoenix walked to the martial addict's side and squatted down. She didn't say anything and looked at the broken pieces of the cup. "Do you understand?" the martial addict asked. "I don't understand." Phoenix shook her head. "What about you? Understand?" "I understand now," the martial addict said excitedly. "Everyone in the world thinks that there are 3 realms in martial arts. A mountain is a mountain, a water is water. A mountain isn't a mountain, a water isn't water. A mountain is still a mountain and a water is still water. But there's actually a 4th realm above these 3 realms. That was don't look. Don't look at the mountain, don't look at the water, sit and look at your heart. Whatever your heart thinks, that's what it thinks. Whatever your heart sees, that's what it sees. We always use our eyes, trying our best to see everything as clearly as possible. But that's not the case. The heart is the purest eye. Otherwise, why is there a phrase called mind's eye? Congratulations, the martial addict sincerely congratulated him. For these martial artists, every time they climb a mountain, it's the same as regaining a new life. The previous life doesn't die, it's just entering another stage. Some people only have one life in their entire lives, but some people are able to continuously train, continuously pursue, to experience the wind and moon, to experience the wind and dust, to reach the end. This kind of saying is a bit profound. The simple version is that when you don't have any money, you can only live the life of a beggar. This is your life, your life. But when you have $100 in your pocket, you can live $100 life. When you have 1,000,000 RMB in your bank card, you can live 1,000,000 RMB life. When you become the richest person in the world, you can live the life of the richest person in the world. No matter what social class or social circle, money has already divided people into different levels. You can choose not to accept it, but it really exists. The same principle applies. When Fang Yan obtained the heart of Tai Chi, he entered another world. He achieved a new self. Now the martial addict was standing at the door of a new world. He couldn't figure it out, so he continued to think. When he figured it out, the golden door suddenly collapsed, welcoming his arrival. "Thank you." The martial addict finally stood up, walked back to the window and sat down, saying, "Little girl, come and have a cup of tea with me." The martial addict didn't refuse. She walked to the opposite side of the martial addict and sat down. She took the initiative to wash the cup, poured a cup of warm tea and brought it over. The martial addict drank the tea in the cup, looked at the phoenix and asked, "You don't want to? Why would I not want to? If you are willing, you won't come back." The martial addict smiled and said, "The writer is not willing, so he will rewrite the story he has written. The painter is not willing, so he will tear up the work he has painted and redraw it. The martial artist is not willing, so he will practice the fist technique he has written before again. The woman is not willing, so she will want to choose again." The phoenix laughed and said, "You are not a martial addict, you are a love addict. When you love something to the extreme, you will become a love addict." The martial addict said calmly, "You can see my love and I can see your love. Can he see it?" The phoenix asked. "He pretends not to see it." The martial addict said. The atmosphere in the meeting room was very heavy. No one spoke and everyone held their teacups and drank tea, as if drinking tea was the most important thing in the world. Xianxia lifted her head and scanned everyone's faces, but accidentally met with Jiang Junling's gaze. It was too late for Xianxia to avoid it. Just as she was about to say something to liven up the atmosphere, the corners of General Ling's lips curled up into a smile. He looked at Xianxia and said, "Xianxia, do you think that I'm in a pathetic state? Sorry state? How is that possible?" Xianxia smiled and shook her head. "Brother is still the most handsome and brilliant brother in my heart. Yes, I am in a sorry state." Jiang Junling sighed and said, "The appearance this time was not glorious. They wanted to create some trouble for us and it was really hard for us to avoid it. With the help of Du Qing, the local tyrant who has been in Huaqing for many years, Fang Yan is like a tiger that has grown wings. It's not just disgraceful. We have been slapped in the face," Lan Ling said with a gloomy face. He left the house at 9:20 a.m. to attend the signing ceremony. It should have taken him only 30 minutes, but he took 2.5 hours to get there. By the time he arrived at the meeting, The auspicious time chosen by the old master had already passed, and the meeting could only be postponed. What was even more embarrassing was that they were holding a meeting inside to announce to the media that they would invest heavily in Long2 Group. They were extremely confident in the future performance and the market of Long2 Group, but there was a group of workers making a ruckus outside. Even though they had given the reporters a lot of money and greeted the leaders of the various newspapers, did they really think that the dirty work had been cleaned up? The secretary knocked on the door and walked in. He looked at Jiang Zhulu with a serious expression and said, "Boss, there is already news of the workers making a ruckus online. Which company released it?" Jiang Zhulu asked fiercely. "Watching News Network." The secretary answered. "Let the public relations department be in charge of this matter and get them to delete the post. I will not allow any news that is unfavorable to us to appear on the internet." Jiang Zhulu seemed to be in a bad mood. His tone was very harsh and he was suppressing his anger. "Forget it." Jiang Junling waved his hand and said with a smile, "Zhu, since they have created such a huge ruckus, how could they not have a backup plan? We can bribe some reporters but we can't bribe all of them. Some of the media will give us face but not all of them. If we don't let them release it, they will release it themselves. It can't be stopped. If we don't do something, I'm afraid that there will be reports about this matter everywhere, and our activities today will become a scandal." Jiang Zhuliu's expression softened a little as he said, "The Jiang family and the Lan family invested heavily in Long2, but we didn't solve the problem of the old employees' insurance. Isn't this pushing us, Long2, to the opposite side of the people? Since we can't stop it, then let's do it properly. If they scold us for not doing a good job, we can just correct it. Get your public relations department to come up with an emergency public relations plan and send it to the meeting room for everyone to discuss. Since Fang Yan has already ignited the flames of war, we naturally have to meet him with our weapons. Don't be impatient for momentary gains and losses. We only need to win once. Win the most important one and that will be enough." Jiang Zhulu returned to his original seat and said with a smile, "Young master is still able to keep his composure. I've been so angry that I've become muddle-headed by those B******'s consecutive moves today." Jiang Junling smiled and didn't say anything else. He knew that with Jiang Zhuliu's intelligence, how could he not be able to solve the problem that was happening before his eyes? Hiding his incompetence while showing off his wisdom to the people around him. Only such a cooperative partner was a smart one. Li Yun finished looking at the report in her hand, frowned and said, "If we only give some compensation to those workers who are causing trouble outside, this amount of money is insignificant to us. But I'm just worried that after the problem here is solved, the other workers will also get the same or better treatment. When that time comes, it will be an astronomical figure." "He's trying to take us down," Jiang Junling said with a smile. Chapter 530. "Eldest young master, do you have any good ideas?" Li Yun looked at Jiang Junling and asked. "No." Jiang Junling shook his head. His gentle gaze swept across everyone's faces. He smiled and said, "I want to let everyone make a choice. If you want a reputation, you have to spend a lot of money. If you can't bear to spend money, you won't have a good reputation. What do you choose?" Everyone was silent for a while. Jiang Zhulu was the first to speak. He said, "Eldest young master, we're sitting here to solve this problem. My mind is in a mess. I can't think of any good ideas in such a short time. Why don't you give us an idea? Whether it's to abandon our reputation or spend money, we'll listen to eldest young master's decision." "That's true." Li Yun nodded in agreement. She was in charge of the general's businesses. Jiang Junling had more decision-making power than her. Since that was the case, why not give out the favor earlier? Who didn't know how to say beautiful words? "Eldest young master, please organize our thoughts and unite our opinions. If we're going to spend money, we'll spend money together." Lan Ling couldn't express her opinions so readily. She said, "I'll send back everyone's opinions. However, after what happened today, I think the Lan clan has a reason to advance and retreat together with everyone. That Fang Yan has gone too far. Huaqing can't allow such a ruffian to ride roughshod over us." Jiang Junling's gaze turned to Lan Ling. He said respectfully, "Uncle Lan, don't take these small things to heart. It's just a game of cards. Winning or losing is a matter of course. This time I didn't think it through. I didn't expect them to make a move on this matter. It's my fault that Uncle Lon was wronged. However, if he stabbed us, we'll just return the favor. We can't hurt ourselves because we're angry. Lon Ling was very pleased with Jiang Junling's respectful attitude and comforting words. A smile finally appeared on her face. She said, "Looks like Junling already has a way to deal with this. Although Uncle Lon is slightly older than all of you, his brain really isn't as fast as you youngsters. Junling, tell us, how should we play with them?" "Throw money," Jiang Junling said calmly. It was as if the people behind him could easily solve the problem by throwing out 30 to 500 yuan after he finished speaking. "Not only do we have to satisfy all the demands of the troublemakers, but we also have to satisfy the demands of all the other Longtu factory workers. We have to raise the welfare of the workers to an unprecedented height. Either you don't do it or you do it. If you do it, then you have to be number one in Huaqing. Isn't this the attitude that an outstanding company should have towards its employees?" Li Yun was shocked and said in a low voice, "Military order this way, we will have to spend 300% more funds on the original foundation. If you want to increase the welfare of the nearly 10,000 employees in Longtu, I'm afraid that it will be an astronomical figure." Jiang Junling smiled but did not reply. He looked at Lon Ling and said, "Uncle Lon, can the Lon clan's enterprise be in line with Longtu's?" Lon Ling's expression was solemn and he said, "I can try my best to fight for it. You know, the Lon clan is not decided by me alone, unless the old master makes a decision. However, military order, since you have made such a decision, you must have your reasons. Is it just to gain the reputation of being a good entrepreneur? If that's the case, the price we have to pay is really too high. Running a business is not about viciousness. Still depends on whether there are benefits or not. Isn't that right?" Jiang Junling nodded and said, "When we finish this matter, we will be number one in Huaqing, the model of outstanding enterprises in the whole of Huaqing and even the whole country. At that time, we should stand up and admit the mistakes in our work and call on the entrepreneurs in Huaqing and even the whole country to respect their employees, improve the welfare of their employees and put the interests of their employees first." Li Yun's eyes lit up and her face was full of joy as she said, "In that case, all the enterprises in Huaqing will have to look up to our Longtu. The Lu clan, which is close to Fang Yen, and Du Qing's Green Cloud Group are no exception. Even Lu Chaoga's Chaoyan technology will not be able to avoid it. If they do not look up to our standards, their companies will be unstable internally and employees will leave. At that time, a large number of talents will re-enter our Longtu. Longtu will once again become number one in Huaqing. The influence of being number one in society will be huge and so will the benefits. There's also the most important use." Jiang Zhuliu's eyes shone brightly and he said, "When the time comes, we will release the news that the Longtu group was forced by Fang Yen and Du Qing to take such measures. In that case, think about it, how many people will see Fang Yen as a thorn in their side?" "Wonderful." Lon Ling slapped her thigh and shouted, "We have taken all the good reputations, but Fang Yen and Du Qing have become the rats on the street that everyone wants to beat up. Those entrepreneurs who have no choice but to cut off their flesh for their employees because of their conspiracies, they can't wait to ruthlessly tear off a piece of flesh from Fang Yen and Du Qing, right? Putting other places aside, I'm afraid that they will be isolated by the entrepreneurs in Huaqing." Wonderful, this move is really too wonderful for words. The saying that a child should be like Jiang Junling is indeed true. He easily and calmly solved the problem of their killer move, and even conveniently stabbed them in the heart. In this case, the money spent was worth it. Oh, it's worth it. It's worth it. I can guarantee you right now that the Lon clan will throw away this sum of money. Jiang Xianxia also looked at Jiang Junling with a face full of astonishment. She thought to herself, this man is indeed very scheming. Fang Yen and Du Qing worked together to set up such a situation that was bound to be damaged, but it was solved by him with just a few words. At the same time that he solved the problem, he pushed Fang Yen and Du Qing to the opposite side of all the entrepreneurs in Huaqing. If Fang Yen and Du Qing hadn't exposed these matters, how would they have lost so much money? If Fang Yen knew about Jiang Junling's counterattack, what kind of reaction would he have? These two outstanding figures of the younger generation would use Huaqing as the battlefield, each displaying their unique skills and methods. What kind of dazzling sparks would there be when they collided? It was really exciting. Jiang Xianxia suddenly realized that she actually didn't hate Fang Yen at all. She also couldn't hate Fang Yen. Furthermore, deep down in her heart she still hoped that he would be able to win this battle. Jiang Junling didn't feel happy because of everyone's praises. The smile on his face gradually disappeared, and he looked at everyone present with an extremely serious gaze. He said, "Since no one has any objections, then we have to execute it as soon as possible. Let's start from solving the problem of those laid-off workers downstairs. Don't waste a single second." Li Yun looked at Jiang Junling and asked, "Eldest young master, what are you worried about?" "I'm worried that someone is ahead of us." Jiang Junling sighed softly and said. Fang Yan didn't treat Phoenix to a meal. Instead he came back to accompany Lu Chaoge for a meal. By the time he drove back, Lu Xiaoge had already prepared the food. 4 dishes and a soup were the standard 3 meals for the two of them during this period of time. Fang Yan said a little reproachfully, "Why are you cooking again? Your hand hasn't recovered yet, it'll be terrible if it gets wet. Why don't you get the nanny to cook in the future?" "No need." Lu Chaoge rejected and said, "I'm afraid that the dishes they cook won't be to your liking. Moreover, my hand has basically recovered, it won't be a problem as long as I'm careful. If you don't let me go to work in the company, there's really nothing for me to do at home." Lu Chaoge wasn't lying. Because of her health, Fang Yan didn't let her work at Chaoyan Science and Technology for the time being. Everything was handed over to a few assistants, and only the most important things were gathered to her to make decisions. Therefore, when she was alone at home, she wanted to do something meaningful. For example, cooking. In the past, she hated to touch those greasy food and cutlery as she felt that it would be easy to hurt her hand. However, when she cooked for Fang Yan, she didn't have such worries at all, and in the process she could gain a lot of happiness. For Lu Chaoge, cooking was a fulfilling and enjoyable thing. If Fang Yan didn't let her cook, she didn't know how to spend the extra time. Fang Yan thought for a while and said, "Well, I'll try to come back from work earlier. If I come back early, I'll cook. If I really can't come back, you'll cook." Lu Chaoge nodded in agreement. Just after the meal, when Fang Yan was busy cleaning up the dishes, the doorbell in the living room rang. Fang Yan walked over and took a look. He found Du Qing and Liya standing in front of the camera at the door. Fang Yan pressed the unlock button, and the electronic iron door automatically shrank to both sides. After Fang Yan washed his hands, he untied the apron around his neck and said to Lu Chaoge, "Du Qing is here." Fang Yan took the initiative to go out to greet Du Qing. Du Qing said with a smile, "Young master, you don't have to be so polite. We're all on the same side and we'll have to come here to drink tea often in the future. How tiring would it be to welcome and deliver it every time?" "Who asked Big Brother Du to be a distinguished guest?" Fang Yan said with a smile. Lu Chaoge personally brought tea to Du Qing and Liya. Du Qing quickly got up and took it. Looking at Lu Chaoge, he said, "Miss Lu is a heroine and has always been my idol. Chaoyan technology has developed to such a scale in just 3 years. Chaoyan Technology's little flame logo is popular all over the world. Miss Lu is the soul. We old guys who have been in the business world for many years are far inferior." Liya knew about Lu Chaoge's deeds and respected her very much. Standing next to Du Qing, she looked at the legendary woman in front of her with curiosity. The genius woman who often appeared in financial magazines, was she dressed in home clothes when she was at home? Using her hands of wealth to serve fragrant tea to the guests? Liya had to turn her eyes to Fang Yan's face again. This man who had been ignored by her before, what kind of magical charm did he have? To be able to make a goddess like Lu Xiaoge willingly pour spoonful for him? Lu Chaoge smiled indifferently and said, "Mr. Du is a senior and also a big brother. It's Chaoge's honor to be valued by you. Chaoyan Technology was able to achieve such results because of the care of our ancestors. I just put in some courage and hard work. How can I compare to Mr. Du who started from scratch?" Du Qing laughed and said, "The outside world is saying that Miss Lu Chaoge, the helmsman of Chaoyan Technology, is as cold as ice. It seems that they lack understanding of Miss Lu. I know that Miss Lu's ability to praise people is not any lower than others. My heart is filled with warmth." Everyone laughed. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.